What is up, Flannelverse? We have kind of a unique show tonight. It's a little bit different than not doing the podcast. I thought that this could have almost worked for the Playing for Keeps podcast. Also, sort of a mix between the podcast and the usual best ball streams. I didn't want to do it on the podcast because we are focusing on one very specific contest here. This is not a show where we're just going to be talking about Krutches and his background. We're going to be talking about the Eliminator contest on Underdog. It's a really unique format, new last year. So in my opinion, not fully solved, but I think if anybody has come close to solving it, Krutches is one of those people who I would think would be the closest to having solved it. So very excited to pick his brain about the Eliminator format tonight. Krutches, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Well, I'm either solving it or donating, so we'll figure out one of them fairly soon. But I do think it is the most solvable. Whether that's whoever does solve it. But yeah, there's not a ton of attention. Obviously, BBM takes most of it, and I'm going to max pretty much everything. But I'll talk about it later. But I think this is one that's good to actually max early, in my opinion. So yeah.
Did you play the Eliminator last year?
No, I might have gotten one entry in. I forget, but it was a little Eliminator, so I think it was pretty small, and it was like at the very end of this draft season. So I think we were like. I was probably pretty burned out in just trying to like finish up, DK mains and BBMs and stuff like that. So no, I didn't get into the format last year.
It was, I think I only did 10, 12. I don't know. Not a ton last year. Had one that got pretty deep and then got to a week where I had no tight end and I think just no tight end, which I know you we'll talk about the tight end thing. I think we're going to have a conversation position by position. I want your takes at each position at some point. But actually, I want to start with, I mean, you just said that you think that it's best to max this out early, get your drafts in early for the Eliminator. Can we just talk about that now? Because I'm curious why that is for you.
Yeah, I think so much of the discourse on best ball, like cabal, is this offseason is like, who's the next Puka and Kyron? And I mean, my answer to that is like nobody. That was an outlier. Realistically, you're trying to hit the Tyquan Thornton, like round 18, scores you one time for the year and contributes. That's historically what round 18 is. There's so many zeros, and you kind of have to choose between, trying to hit a single and trying to hit for a home run. And I honestly think like, in a larger like BBM sense, a lot of the people drafting right now are like burning drafts with dead roster spots. Not because they're drafting early, because they're like gal braining 18th round stuff.
Sure.
And like Easy DFS has talked about this. Like I have very boring like BBM takes. Like, it's a lottery. You draft the most. You allocate. There's obviously the data that's like good data in the manifesto that Pat's talked about. Positional allocation. Don't build stupid teams basically, and then hope you sun run. Like it's very, like not to sound nihilistic, but it's a very like lottery sense of tournament. And then you play all the side contests to realize your equity quicker. So the reason I think Eliminator is interesting to me, and the reason I maxed it first. Is after reading the ETR article on it and just kind of messaging Sacrilege a little bit and kind of chatting about it with people, is that I think this early in the season, I can just, the way I built most of my teams is in the 18th, I'm mainly just trying to hit a single, right? I'm taking the Greg Dortch, the Klee Freeman, at the end, I started mixing in Jalen McMillan because it's some good buzz out of camp. But, I really avoided like initially Jalen McMillan. I avoided the Patriots guys who could be zeros late. And it was just like a lot of CEH, Greg Dortch, the guys who I'm like project pretty well, project to have a role. And so I think right now is when you draft those kind of teams. And then come camp is when if you're tuned in and you're following 32 beat writers and all these guys, like that's when you have like an edge, even if it's for a day or two. So I think that's like the interesting part about maxing it early for me.
Yeah. Trying to hit those, I guess. So my hesitation with that would be as soon as week 2 in the Eliminator, you're going to be playing against teams that drafted in late August. Like you only play your pod for 1 week in the Eliminator. In the second week and going forward, you could be playing against people who drafted way later. Are you concerned at all? Aren't you worried about the people who drafted later with more of an information edge than you have right now, being able to spot, who is going to be the actual backup running back on the Bears or whatever, little information edges? Do you have any concerns about that?
No, I mean, part of it is there's time is a finite resource, especially in best ball summer. So it's like,
yeah,
I can't, I did 100, like said earlier today, I did 150 all fast eliminators. Like I can't do that later. Sure, you could probably queue up 150 slows and like knock it out during training camp. And maybe it is better, but like I was going to say the negative part of the eliminator is, not to be like how rich, but like it's a pretty small prize pool, relatively speaking, right? And the investment's 1,500. I was saying I do wish almost that if it fills, it would do like a big dog style eliminator where it's 250 cool. Entry or something, mid stakes, high stakes, because it's like without the regular season, it's a great sweat, like the regular season component of BBM. So weekly winners to me isn't interesting because it's just such a crapshoot in my opinion. I don't think there's any edge for me there personally, or at least I haven't thought about going through and doing it. So for me, it's like, I think this is something where I can just have a much better advance rate out of the regular season. And then, if I can get several teams through the finals and it's like, I have a nice sweat in week 17 for 100K at least, which is, nothing to sneeze at. It's not BBM money, but I think also like you can multi-table these drafts. So you can do them like it really, the toughest part is the fill rate. Usually I'm finishing one as another one starts depending on the day. Sometimes I can get up to 3, like right as one's finishing. So if you can multi-table these, I agree with Copper in the chat. Like this is by far my favorite secondary contest. I think eventually we'll see them size this up, get rid of weekly winners. Like maybe they'll keep a smaller weekly winners for the people that like it. But I mean, realistically, like BBM, great. Lotto, this is just like a fun cash game that you can sweat each week and be like, all right, 10 out of 12 advanced. Let me see if I advanced above or below average this week and see, so and like I said, I do think it is the most like solvable because the structure each week. There's more stuff you can control for, right? Every single week, I feel like so.
Sure. Yeah. So partially the drafting now is just a prioritization thing. Like you would rather save your BBMs because those are, you really want the information edge because you have the best possible outcome in the BABM. You're just prioritizing regular standard best ball more so than the eliminator. So you're saving those for later and getting your eliminators done now. Is it partially why you're doing it now more so than the edge?
Yeah, so I think for me personally, and this is what I've planned out, is I finished my eliminators. I was hoping to do it, by last weekend, which I did. And then basically from here until like maybe mid-July, I'd love to get my DK main event finished up because I think that's like the second biggest early edge just because drafters are so bad over there. And with the extra 2 rounds, people just punt those picks. Like, I mean, I'm not saying like I can tell you for sure CEH is RB2, but like they're drafting like, I saw someone draft like Bub Means in New Orleans, like just the Reese Zemet from Kansas City, like guys who like aren't going to see the field, and that's just like the last 2 rounds that kind of get punted, and then like that's while like Drake May or Bo Nix are on the board, and it's like what are we doing here?
Wow.
Or even like to a lesser extent, like if you want you want to get 3 onesies on DraftKings, like round 20, you can still get like Dawson Knox at 240. Like that's a perfectly fine tight end rotational guy, like versus just completely punting. So so that's like my second thing, that just because I'm better than the average DK drafter. And then the sharpest field and the funnest drafts are on Underdog, but like I said, I think those are where I'll do last. Just try to like have the most information and do that, because I think like the most plus if you time for like in theory, if you could like have enough time in a day, would be like to 150 on the last day that it's open, right? Like that's probably the best. Agreed. In general, just informationally, if you're building smart to do that, but it's obviously not really feasible. So
yeah, and for those of us doing content, we're sort of forced to do it throughout the summer, and also like I probably would even if I weren't doing content, just because I'm an addict. I want to be drafting best ball throughout the summer. Obviously, you can get some good practice doing it early. So there are some reasons to draft a bit early on, but that makes sense to kind of hold off on your biggest bullets for later with BBM. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, BBM's a fun game too. I mean, you want it to be fun too. So like I've drafted probably 30 BBM teams, just mainly right after the draft and slow down. But It's like if I'm bored and I want to hop in one of Pete's stream drafts and get sniped on everyone, then I can do that. But for the most part, strategically, I'm trying to do it late. So
yeah. Ryan Kinger asked a good question, but before we get there, I'm realizing that we didn't even give any kind of like explanation of what the format is. Like I probably should have done that to start, because I'm sure there will be some people here who don't really know anything about the Eliminator format. So I'm going to pull up Underdog right now so we can just take a look at that. Before we dive too deep in, I just want to make sure people understand what we are talking about here. With the Eliminator contest. So this is a contest similar to other best ball contests where you get in, you enter, you're put in with a group of 12 who enter around the same time as you. You draft with those 12. It's 18 rounds. Everything very similar to best ball. However, very, very different from BBM, the other contests, because you're only with the pod that you draft with for week 1. You are then the top, and we can here. I'll go find the numbers. Actually, I pulled this up on.
Do you have the ETR article?
I do have the ETR article up here. I don't want to show too much because I don't know if this is a free article, so I don't want to like show the entire article, give people a peek behind the ETR paywall. But I figure showing this graph is good, just from showing you the percent of teams that advance each week. But there's actually, I'm going to pull it up really quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say there's one that's really easy to see. Yeah.
Yep. Here, I'm going to take a look at this one. So this is a nice little graph that Justin Herzig or somebody at the ETR team made for us. This is a nice, check out this article by Herzig if you haven't already. Really good one. But this shows you the structure. So week 1, you're in your pod with 12 teams. 10 out of the 12 advance, as you can see here. That's 83%. Then you're regrouped into a second group. This in week 2, you're going to be, as you see here, group of 10. 8 out of 10 advance. Again, regrouped, and so on and so forth. You can see here the advancement structure. You go through until week 17, and this is the biggest wrinkle here. So throughout the structure, you're playing against anywhere from, I guess we get as little as 5. In week 10, just 5 teams, but anywhere from 5 to 10 teams, and within each of those groups, anywhere from 50% to 83% are advancing. And as the chart I was showing below shows, there's generally a trend toward a smaller percentage of teams advance later in the year than early. So just to give you kind of an idea of how the structure works. But then week 17, this is what is different from last year. Last year in week 17, you get to the final, only 6 teams made the final. This year, there are 115 teams in the final. Now, I know you didn't play a ton last year, Krutches. What do you think, though? To me, it changes the format so drastically. I didn't like that they changed to the 115 team final, but it is something. It kind of does change the strategy, but maybe it's just a different game, and I wanted to keep playing the same game I was playing last year. Certainly, still a fun game. But what do you think of the 115 teams? Kind of still a GPP final versus the 6 teams they had last year. Do you have any opinion on what you would prefer?
Yeah, no, I like this because now I haven't done the math to see what your expected teams are in the finals if you max. What's the total number of entries in this? I guess we could do some back of it. So there's 110,000. If you have 150,
I just look here. 110,000 for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that expectation just over 1, or am I doing that math wrong in the finals?
If you're doing 150, oh man, so 150 teams.
1%. 1% of 110,000 is okay. So it's like 1 out of 10 chance to have a finals team. But basically, I think it's fun because most likely most of us aren't going to get BBM finals teams, so you get a little bit of a GPP sweat week 17, but just in a different format. And it's more like a Thunderdome size or whatever. I think Thunderdome's around 100 and something, unless I'm crazy in DFS. But it's kind of gives you a little bit of a wrinkle where a lot of the higher stakes DFS or best ball are a 10-person, 40-person final. With Mastiff or a big dog, maybe something like that. And then these big 550 or 1,022-person finals. So it's I think the other thing that's actually more interesting to me than that is how do you build a team when you don't care about the ping pong effect of one guy on your team, one receiver busts week 16, another guy goes off week 17, then you get low ownership on one of them in the finals. There's none of that.
Right.
So you don't have that aspect. I was joking on the team I drafted earlier where they were hating on Geno Smith. And I'm I was talking to Deez in our chat after, and I was they could all be benched by week 12 or by week 15. And I don't care because Dak could have a very average game, just enough to advance me 50%. and then still be like low owned in the finals. Like he doesn't have to smash. He just has to not dud completely. So like there's not the aspect of like, I'm drafting a one quarterback team, Gal bringing it, and then Josh Allen smashes. Sure, you get to the finals and he's like 60% owned, right? So there's not like that aspect. So it's just going to be a much more random final, probably closer to like a PGA in a sense, something like that where, the best ball albatross finals are, there's 6 out of 10 golfers, not all of them need to score. And so you get this kind of flatter ownership.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit different. I guess the reason that I don't like this is just that I thought there was more edge when there were only 6 teams in the final versus 115, because I think a lot of these contests, and I like weekly winners also, but I'll save that conversation for another time. I do think that there is at least theoretical edge, although there are so many teams in it that it'll take you a long time to realize that edge, similar to best ball, all these other contests. I'm similar to Sacrilegious in that I think I would love a weekly winners with a smaller field, higher buy-in. But anyway, we'll save that conversation. I feel like there's more edge if there's only 6 teams in week 17, because more people will just draft it straight up, just like regular best ball. Like that's what you find in weekly winners in other contests. Like people just don't adjust to the format. They continue to adjust what they've heard is best for like classic best ball, and they draft like that. And so the 115 teams in the final makes a bit more sense if you are trying to stack for week 17. Like that all makes more sense when you have 115 teams in the final as opposed to just 6 teams in the final, where that's kind of like where it's kind of I would say almost a negative to correlate if there were only 6 teams in the final with 115. I still think it makes some sense to correlate a bit.
Your mic sounds fine to me. So I don't know if it's me, Neil, some guy in the chat was mentioning.
Yeah, Spurious. I think my mic should be fine. My mic is actually super quiet. So am I super loud now? This is just my regular volume that I turned it up to.
I've heard you fine the entire time.
Okay.
But
all right.
I don't know if the stream is.
All right. Then I won't worry about it unless other people have issues with it. You sound fine to me. So I think that we are okay, unless I hear from others. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. What the preference is, because this is what we have to work with.
Yeah, and I think like it's kind of a cop-out answer, but like good players adjust to it. And so like if people want to overstack because they think it's a GPP, then I think that's a mistake. And so like you'll see it if you hop in these rooms. Like there's other structural mistakes people are making, in my opinion, that are worse than stacking or not stacking. And I still think it's perfectly viable to go fully unstacked. Not to get off topic, but I was just reading the updated manifesto Leone put out for BBM, and he still comes back to like maintaining the status of like everyone talks about week 17, but like your advance rate is the number one EV like determining factor. And here is one where we can control for the advance rate the most. And so like if you get 2 teams instead of 1 or 1 instead of 0, obviously like and they're completely uncorrelated, you're still live, especially in a smaller field. And so I think, we really want to be looking at maybe single stacking, or like I talked about earlier, you can single stack a receiver with a quarterback and then a running back for the downside protection floor version. So like, but I think a lot of people don't adjust to that. So
yeah, I like that idea. You talked about in your stream earlier. I think that is sharp. The stacking the quarterback with the running back for the higher floor, particularly on good teams. If you can do it with teams that are going to put up a lot of points, like somebody's going to be scoring you points that week, that makes a lot of sense. Shooting for floor here. Essentially, that's the big difference we're working with here. Is you're looking for weekly floors on your team that are going to get you into the top half. Essentially of your group every single week. So it's a fun format where you do have to adjust a little bit, adjust your thinking for shooting for floor instead of just taking the biggest upside picks with every single one of your picks. And we'll talk about some of the ways that you can do that to try to hit the highest floor in these drafts. I like. So
can I say last thing on the chart here? This is like similar. I'm getting ready for the World Series of Poker stuff, so I've been brushing off the skills there. And so, like, if you think about this and you don't need to memorize what the advance rates are each week. You almost think of it as like a poker range, like if you've played like an opening range. So it's like I just kind of set the Mendoza line to like week 10, right? So like week 10 is when it gets tougher, in my opinion. So, and it's not like a huge difference, but it's like 2/3 before that mostly, and then it's about 50-60% after. Which kind of coincidence with the 2 heaviest bye weeks of week 12, week 14. So you have to make a decision going in what you want to do with that, and then go from there. And then the other last thing is that after week 7 is the cash line. So like, you can decide on week 5 and 6 buys if that's a big deal to you, and week 7 buys, or or do you take the risk earlier in the season, and then you have a full team for week 12, week 14 when there's 6 teams on bye and they're really good teams. So that's like the 2 things to just keep in mind for the schedule for the most part.
Yep, and I was going to ask you about the bye weeks thing, because here is where I'm a bye week bro for regular best ball. Here you can really amp up your bye week bro tendencies for people like me, or if you are a non-bye week bro, you got to start paying attention to them in this format. And we had a question about bye weeks, and I'm just kind of scrolling through, showing you the payment structure. And unfortunately, I can't see on here. I should make a chart for where the payments correspond with the weeks, the elimination week. So I guess the $15 would be if you are eliminated in week 7.
So at the end of round 7, so round 8, so week 8 is when you get your 14,490, and then 10,143 is after the next week.
Okay.
7.
So this is essentially weekly. Each of these buffers is a new week. Okay.
Yeah, it's weekly after that, and then like I said, 115 in the final. So I don't know. There's probably a couple pay breaks in like the last couple of weeks, I'm guessing, but
yeah. So if you it's a $10 entry. If you make it through the first 7 weeks, get to week 8, you're going to get $15. So you make $5 making it to week 8. You get $10 for making it to week 9, 20 for 10, et cetera, et cetera. There's still obviously the biggest money is in the final, but it does make it sort of an interesting wrinkle, and that is where the bye week conversation starts. And I actually remember when this came out last year, my first instinct, and I talked about this, I think it was Will Patterson from Saberson. I initially, I was like, yeah, to me, this means just like shoot for, you want to, obviously you still want to offset your bye weeks, definitely. But my first instinct was later bye weeks is better because the cash line is in week 7. So I can just like have 18 players for like the first 10 weeks of the year, whatever. And he immediately responded with, well, you probably want to have more players for the weeks where fewer advance. So it's like, there are a lot of different ways to think about the bye weeks. So you're just trying to get to the cash line and hammer the later buys? Are you trying to have more players on the weeks where it's harder to advance? And I think that is a very interesting question. And we got that question from Ryan here. Ryan asked, are you an early bye week bro? Do you mix it up? Are you late bye week bro? How do you think about the bye weeks for this format?
Early on, I was really trying to be conscious of it in drafts, like my first few, and kind of feeling it out. And I realized that like, and it's very room to room, but like I think people are more scared of the week 12, week 14 buys because I think they're just more conscious of it. And like you naturally end up with players on those teams, like any Houston, Baltimore, Atlanta, like all these teams that people are drafting early. It's probably like they see, okay, I've got Bijan, I can't take, or I've got Drake London, I can't take Olave, or and then those guys start sliding a few picks, and it kind of adds up. So I'm generally going to like counter trade the market and just like do what the room is giving me. And I think like over a portfolio of 150, you're going to have teams that are somewhat, balanced, but have some early exposure and some late. So I think both are fine. It's kind of like, similar to like poker as far as the cash line and the bubble. Like, if you do want to like have a strategy going in and stack early buys, you're doing the thing where you're playing very exploitatively early in chance to getting a lot of chips and having a big lead, a theoretical lead in week 12 and week 14, where you're like, I've got 18 players live and half my pod has, 3 to 4 players off that week. So, or do you do the thing where it's like, in theory, you could be like, I'm never going to take a player with a bye before week 8 and then just draft that way. And you're like, very live, but it's also the easiest week. So, and then, you make the cash and then you just have to get lucky and, hope a bunch of players don't bust on the same week and you still could get through. So, I think it's fun and that like, it's a create your own adventure. I think I didn't take a hard stance one way or the other. I'm more just concerned about like, I don't want to take a bunch of week 12 receivers together. Like I said, if I'm taking a 7 wide receiver room, I probably like really don't want to get close to over 3. I mean, definitely not over 3, but you want probably like 2 when that max. And then sometimes like there's just like a crazy value that gives you a unique team. Like, okay, sure, I'll take them. But I think it's just being more cautious of what you have on your team and then just avoiding that. So.
Yeah, I think that is generally how I've landed also. Like I'm not really targeting all of the week 12, 14 bye weeks. Like last year, I think I did a lot of that targeting the late bye weeks. I think this year it's more just like I'm just being a bye week bro, but like an uber bye week bro about it. I think that you're right though. Like wide receiver, and I think you said this on your stream earlier. Like, yeah, you're drafting 7, 8 wide receivers. You don't need to worry if 3 of them have the same bye week. Like I probably wouldn't want more than 3 on my team at any position with the same bye week. But even a wide receiver, you can probably get away with 3 different wide receivers having the same bye week. So you don't always have to be breaking every single tie for the a unique bye week. I think that has generally been my approach too. I don't necessarily focus on late or early bye weeks. Just making sure that I have a range of bye weeks throughout my lineup has been the approach that I land on as well. Let's talk position by position. So that's kind of the big thing. Like we kind of covered the biggest thing is you are trying to avoid having losing out on it. You're trying to raise your floor for every single week, so you want to be a bye week bro from that perspective. But let's also talk about how you can do that position by position, starting with quarterback. So my first instinct was I think a different approach than what you brought up on the stream. So my first instinct is elite quarterbacks are better for this format because they have a higher floor in general. So you get a Josh Allen, you take a Josh Allen and another quarterback in the first 100 picks, you're going to really raise your floor, hopefully get at least 20, 25 points out of your quarterback every single week, kind of lock in some of that floor. But I thought that you made an interesting point. So it sounded, at least to me, listening to your stream earlier, that you prefer waiting on quarterback and then taking 3. Is that correct? How do you approach quarterbacks in this format?
Yeah, I was hoping you didn't see the stream earlier because I was going to ask you on your thoughts, like unadulterated by mine, because like you've played a lot more DFS than I have on DraftKings and stuff. So like I don't know if you're a cash game player or not, but I was curious, like when you think of it, this is a cash game for 17 or for 16 weeks, right? So like when you're building a cash game DFS, and this is obviously tough because week to week there's values at each position, but like generally speaking, you're paying up for quarterback, right? And on DFS, unless there's like a $4,000 Ryan Tannehill's backup, or I forget what it was. But generally speaking, you're spending up for like Josh Allen or Lamar or somebody on DraftKings. Maybe you get one stud running back and then one guy who's a backup starting that week is just a free square. Usually you're getting the Tyreek Hill, the Justin Jefferson in there, pairing them with whoever's the cheap wide receiver filling in plus another guy, and then generally you're punting tight end, I feel like, on cash, unless because it's just such an unprojectable position. So that's how I thought about it. But like I said, it's different because salary isn't for a 1 week thing. So we can't say I can pay Christian McCaffrey this week because he's playing in a great game matchup, right? So I'm just going to draft stud running backs, or at least saying, okay, you have a hero running back build on like DraftKings with one elite guy. I'm going to do that every time. So I think it's more about thinking about like, yes, there's the draft capital buckets that we use for like BBMs, but I think it's interesting to think about it as far as like a positional allocation, right? So, I'm not saying to punt quarterback. I always try to get some guys that have a ceiling, right? So a lot of my exposure is in the Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence range, where those guys are top 10 type talents. But I'm just hammering wide receiver and some running backs early, for example, and then I'm getting maybe 2 of those guys, a lot of times a Dak in the top right around 100. And then I'm grabbing Bo Nix or, Drake May, or, Derek Carr is like my favorite back there, along with Drake May, where it's like, Derek Carr is a great eliminator pick, most likely. And the other thing is kind of just in case people didn't tune earlier, I was talking about Geno just because he fit our build, but someone was hating on him for, he could get benched later in the seasons. I mean, this is obviously Daniel Jones is the number one guy we talk about with this, but like if you have 3 quarterbacks, let's say you get Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, and then you're like, I'm going to take Geno Smith. The 3 guys, their buys don't overlap. Geno Smith gets benched. Like, do you care? Like your main scorer ideally is Dak, right? If he's your highest upside guy. If Rodgers is healthy, he has a chance to score, a good amount of points in any given week. So you're saying like, I'm getting these guys for like injury's sake, to cover injured weeks, cover bye weeks. And so I have 2 shots every single week, when it comes to both injuries and buys. And so that's kind of like why I default to it, where it's like, I'm definitely not trying to spend like bucket 5 on like these, you know, if you're like using like bricks overlay or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like probably in like bucket 3 to 4 for quarterbacks, where I'm like spending a little below the elite level, but getting 3 with no overlapping bye weeks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense to me. You kind of did make me rethink it because my natural inclination is just like, let's lock in that expensive quarterback for every single week. Just like we're paying up a quarterback, we're doing it for every week, locking in some floor there. But I do definitely, you're more vulnerable to injury risk with 2. Like so that is the big concern. If you're only taking 2, and even if they are 2 that are in the top 100, well, as soon as you lose 1, if it's, you know, the bye week lines up with 1 year quarterback being injured, suddenly you're at 0 quarterback for a week and you're dead. Like essentially 0. I mean, you're not necessarily dead, but like you're fighting a pretty big uphill battle with 0 quarterback from that week. So I definitely, I think I'll probably do a mix this year. I've already done some where I go the elite quarterback route, but that definitely is a point well taken, that like you're pretty vulnerable taking 2 quarterbacks if you have any kind of injuries throughout the year. So maybe something that I need to think through a little bit more. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think this is where like I have taken a decent amount. Let me see in my exposures. But I think if I had to guess, my highest elite quarterback exposure is actually going to be Patrick Mahomes. So I have 8.5% Patrick Mahomes, and so that's 8.7%. That's my highest. Like, and then like the guy I would probably counterpoint have the absolute least of would be like Anthony Richardson, where I'm like we've seen him, you know. And this is where it's tough because in BBM you're never like saying, oh, I'm going to draft for injury downside, right, but you don't care about injury downside there. You're just drafting for upside. And so here it's like we do care about downside a little bit. And so if I take the guy who's like running 5 to 6 times a game and always, you know, getting out of bounds and looking to throw first, I'm probably happier with that than the guy who's like, I'm going to truck someone because I'm 250 pounds and, you know, get into the end zone for the huge, you know, 40-point week. Right. So I have, you know, 8.5% of him, 7% Josh Allen, 5% Jalen Hurts, 4% Anthony Richardson, 2% Lamar. And so it's like, I just think, I'm going to go with like the proven pocket passer who's probably has a much better team around him this year if I'm going elite quarterback. And then, but even then, so one interesting thing is when I do Mahomes, I still go 3 QB. So I'll get like Mahomes, you know, usually at a value. And then, but the difference is I'm going like 2 punt QB. So it'd be like Mahomes, Drake May, and Daniel Jones or something, right? Where it's like, I'm probably still in like bucket 3, like high bucket 3 of quarterbacks if you're doing it on that. And that gives me like a really nice like 2 outs at week 6 bye. And then hopefully Mahomes is scoring most weeks. And then if not, I've got, you know, 2 guys who have theoretical upside, you know, and then rushing floor if Drake May is on the field. So
right. And then that week 6 bye, you got 2 guys who could potentially cover for Mahomes during that week. You just need one of them to hit a big. Yeah, that makes sense. You also you mentioned Josh Allen as your second highest exposed of the elite quarterbacks. Jewish McCaffrey brought him up, and I was just thinking you had a tweet I think last week about Josh Allen, how much better he is than Lamar Jackson. Sort of broke my heart as somebody who is drafting a ton of Lamar Jackson. But probably a good point that in my mind, they're like very, very similar as quarterbacks, but Josh Allen just does, you know, consistently. He's a lot more consistent than Lamar Jackson historically. But Josh Allen, you think that he's I'm guessing you draft him less here than in BBM.
Yeah, probably. I mean, like this is more of a player taking. I generally think the like Dak range is the most underpriced in this like entire season. Like Dak, Herbert, Tua, and like and Trevor Lawrence are probably the guys I'm like hammering along with like Daniel Jones, Drake May, whose price just makes 0 sense to me. And like I said, I'm not buying the like he's sitting 14 weeks stuff. So like, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see like, oh, it's week 3, like we suck. Let's put him in and see. You know, everyone talks about the Patriot way, which I get. Like I said, it was really weird. And this is just like a personal take that now I have like a confirmation bias on. But when I saw the news thing on the Underdog blurb under him, and I click on it and they're like, he's now the number 2 quarterback. And I was like, they really started him behind Bailey Zappi. That's like, this just makes it seem like a whole like dog and pony show or something where it's like, is this a real like bench risk, or is it like the Patriots doing Patriots things like hazing the guy until he's like, oh, you know, every other team wanted to trade their future for this guy. Maybe we should just play him. So, you know.
Yeah. not to get too deep into player takes. We're talking more format than, but I'm just curious your thoughts on. You mentioned Drake May. You did not mention Bo Nix, who again in my mind it's like both feel like very similar bets to me. I know Drake May like was the clear one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft. So like clearly the NFL views him much better than Bo Nix. But even from a fantasy perspective, do you see that as an entirely different bet?
No, I honestly think it's probably a blind spot for me. Like I said, I get onto one path and I just kind of go down that path a lot. I'd say the biggest thing that breaks the tie for me isn't like ceiling or floor. Like I think Nix is a great floor and he's probably an elite pick. I just like, unless I get Sutton, there's no wide receiver I want to pair with him, because this is what I talked about earlier. I think like the Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, like both could be total zeros. Like you could see like Josh Reynolds, Cortland Sutton, and Tim Patrick playing, like, and then these guys just swapping in for like one big play here and there. So like I just hate that entire zone. And so it's like most of my Bo Nix is probably like him and Jaleel McLaughlin stacked or something, where it's like, all right, pass catching back, quarterback, let's like run this. And if I need a running back, and then I just have, and then the other thing is they're both week 14. So it's kind of like I can never do like Bo Nix and Drake May together for those reasons.
Yeah.
But I think he's fine. And then I forgot to mention like Will Levis is another guy I have 17% of here. Probably massively mispriced. Maybe better in BBM. I don't know. He has like probably more of a ceiling guy, but at the same time, you're getting him at 170 ADP, a week 5 buy, which is just Herbert in him. So it's fairly comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we've gone through quarterback. We'll go through position by position. But before we get into running backs, I just want to take a look at the bye weeks overall. And you see in week 7, just 2 teams on bye, Dallas and Chicago. Week 9, just 2 teams on bye, Pittsburgh and San Francisco. Do you prioritize these teams that are on bye weeks where there aren't a ton of teams on bye that week? Does that give you, do you give a little bit of an added bonus to San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Dallas, Chicago players because because you're trying to offset bye weeks? It's easier to do that as opposed to week 14 when you have 6 teams on bye here, or week 12 where we have 6 teams on bye. It's a little bit easier to prioritize when you're trying to offset bye weeks. Is that a factor for you when you're drafting? Is that something you're thinking about intentionally trying to take players, break tie towards players that are not on like week 14, week 12, where you can get fewer teams on the bye?
Yeah, I think it's like with correlation, similar. It's just like the difference is here I'm breaking ties in favor of that. And so if I like the players already in those buys, like, obviously this is like more of a player take thing, but like you look at like round 2 and it's like I can take Chris Olave or I can take Brandon Ayuk. Like I know there's a ton of week 12 buys out there. Like, there's a conversation to be had about like floor ceiling with these guys. Like Debo is another one where it's like, but like Ayuk feels like to me a little safer because it's like, well, he's still like the downfield alpha there. And like if there's some outside, like, in my opinion, the 49ers would want to keep Ayuk over Debo if they could, as the kind of the focal point of the, Debo's more of a gadgety guy. So like, I'll be like, okay, instead of, I'll mix in Ayuk over Olave, even at like closer to the 1-2 turn just to get some different builds. And then it's like, it doesn't hurt to be like, well, I know I'm not going to run into any other week 9 bias except for like Ricky Pearsall later. So
yeah, it's an interesting, it's not something that I've factored in all that much, but definitely something that I think is, at least worth considering a little bit. It is something I factor in a little bit, trying to get that week 9 bye helps a little bit when you don't have, or the week 7 Cowboys, whatever, helps at least a little bit with the bye weeks. All right, let's move on and talk about running backs. And yeah, this is a good point by Jewish McCaffrey. If we're doing QB RB in this format, there are still several Denver options to pair with Knicks. I think it still helps to have a pass catcher for that week 17. Like you still ideally would like your quarterbacks, I think, to be at least skinny stacked with a pass catcher. But I do think it's more viable here to go Bo Nix with Jaleel McLaughlin or something. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mentioned that like 2 seconds before his comment that I said most of my Bo Nix is probably with Jaleel. So I mean, I think that's fine. And I think it's also better probably to do on like a Bo Nix because you're like, if I have Dak Prescott, Bo Nix and Derek Carr, like I'm probably not expecting Bo Nix to score for me in week 17 when it's a GPP. It's probably going to be Dak or Derek Carr. Yeah. So like, do I really care that like I need him to throw 2 touchdowns to Jaleel McLaughlin? No, because I just want like Jaleel to maybe score on his own twice and then Dak goes off with CeeDee Lamb, right? Like that's realistically what you're going for in a GPP still. So I think it's perfectly fine. And even like I said, I love like Isaiah Pacheco, Mahomes. there it's like maybe a little more suboptimal in a GPP because you're like, well, both of them aren't going off, but that's what you have, 5 other running backs for. So
yeah. Sealan says, Neil, edging us with entering this eliminator. No, I said at the beginning, we're going to do a little conversation first. We'll go through it probably in about 10 minutes. So we'll give us at least 10 minutes to get through the other positions, our strategies for the other positions. Then we'll hop into eliminator, get Krutches his 152nd draft in the eliminator format, because you did one earlier, right? You've already done your 150. Is it just 150? Yeah. Will this be 152?
Yeah. I was coerced into a rare Pat Fryermuth share, so it made me feel a little uncomfortable, but it's kind of good. Like I usually just do all my drafts on my own, so it's just my brain power.
Yeah, I rarely coerce my guests. Occasionally I will, but rarely.
No, there's 3 of us on the team, so it was all good. And he's probably a good pick. Like I said, I have blind spots, so it's
Yeah, he seemed fine for that team. Running back. So running back, and I guess we can stop alluding to your team earlier. How do you approach running back in this format in general? Are you hero RB, zero RB? Are you going, hammering RB early because you care more about the early season production here than you do in like BBM? What's your approach?
Yeah, so I'm basically, I would say exclusively hero or zero, leaning towards zero. And then also like the archetype of running back I like is much more the committee back due to their pricing for one. And two, like the risk in BBM with like a committee back is that they just don't have the ceiling. And I don't care about that here, at least most weeks. And then I can get lucky week 17 or there's injuries week 17. So like if I just go down my highest exposure guys right now, it's Antonio Gibson, Jalen Warren, Zach Charbonnet, CEH, Ty Chandler, Chase Brown, Marshawn Lloyd, Rico Dowdle. That's literally from top to bottom. Everyone from 38% down to 20%. And then it's Jonathan Brooks, Brian Robinson, and then Joe Mixon's like the first hero RB, modified hero RB guy that I have. So I'm basically like, and this is same thing you'll see in receivers, is that I'm basically hammering stud wide receivers, making up for it with volume or quantity over quality with like committee backs. And then just, hopefully they're popcorning ceiling weeks, but realistically, if most of those kind of pass catching role backs are getting like 7 to 12 points in a week, it's probably good enough to advance. And so, if I have stud wide receivers, so that's kind of been my thesis, but I would be curious to see if you had another thesis on running back here.
I think I do. I do a lot of zero RB in classic best ball. I think I'm a little bit more inclined to go hero RB here. But depending on how you classify, like I do think like Joe Mixon as your modified hero RB makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like guys like David Montgomery, like maybe I just move up my zero RB a little bit to like I'm more inclined to take David Montgomery in this structure because of the high floor. But yeah, it's I guess I'm just more focused on getting early season production, making sure that I have some running back who's going to be scoring me 10 fantasy points. Hopefully, two running backs who are going to score 10 fantasy points plus from week 1, which you kind of want to do that in BBM anyway. So it's not a huge modification for me. It's just I'm a little bit more inclined to go for those less sexy players. Dave Montgomery is like the first one that pops to mind for me of the like I haven't picked him. Yeah, Rachaad White. That's a great example too. Just like guys that like I don't think that the ceiling is massive. I agree with you. Like committee backs definitely feel a little bit better. Like Chase Brown is a good example. Tyjae Spears, like if you can get 10 points out of each of your running backs, you don't have to worry that some people are going to be getting 40 points out of their running backs, 45 points out of their running backs, because you don't have to beat everybody in your contest. You only have to beat half the teams, usually not even half the teams in your contest. So you definitely don't need to get quite the same ceiling. And
I was going to say, and this isn't like a anti first round running back thing. I think like I'm mega bullish on Bijan Robinson this year. And like anytime that there's the tier break in round 1 and you have picks 7, 8, 9, and like all the receivers go, like I'm not going to reach on Puka and Garrett Wilson and AJ Brown. I'm just going to take Bijan and Brees. So it is really just positionally based. And then like really the only like thing you saw us earlier is like CeeDee Lamb is kind of my 1-1 here, just because, and I do mix in CMC, but I just think like consistency week to week, the targets are going to be there like an insane amount. I think the Niners know they're a playoff team, so maybe they just like give Eli Mitchell a little more work this year and kind of like dial back the MVP stuff for CMC with how he got banged up down the stretch last year. And then I just think structurally, like you take it's not every draft, but sometimes if you take CMC 1-1, you get like the run, like even Malik Neighbors, everybody goes before the turn, and it's like, well, I have Kyron and HN here, but I can't take them. And then it's like you take, you reach on like a, Cooper Cup at the turn, someone who's a 35, 34 ADP guy. And then even worse, in my opinion, is the 49, 48 range is like really, really rough, where you're like, if you're in a bad room, like Christian Kirk's gone, Amari Cooper's gone, T. Higgins is gone, and you're like, am I going to reach on like Xavier Worthy at 49 or something? Like, and it's really rough. And so to me, that's the thing where it's like, I know I get CeeDee Lamb, like I'm going to get HN or Kyron, like they probably follow you in further in this format. So it's like, I get my anchor RB with HN or Kyron, 2 wide receivers, and then 48, 49. It's like, I'm not worried, because if I go RB or RB tight end there, like I've made a couple detours and I'm right back to double tapping receiver at 72, 73 with all the rookie guys there that are, a lot of my exposures.
Do you view any players, speaking specifically about running backs, are there any guys that you're just like, this guy's way worse for this format than BBM? And HN was a guy that you talked about on the stream earlier, and I thought that was a good example of somebody that we think of as like, he's perfect for BBM because we love the massive ceiling. And I don't know how you feel about HN's floor. Like, it's sort of hard. We didn't get one full season sample size with HN last year because he missed time. But are there any players off the top of your head that you can think of that just like, and I guess you can do even non-running backs if you want to, but any players that like immediately you're like, yeah, I'm out on him in this format?
Some of these are my player take stuff. But I think, like, contrary to popular belief, where people are like, quote unquote eliminator ass pick that Peter made up. I'm not drafting boring players. I'm just structuring my teams with more floor. So, like, I think HN is a perfectly fine pick. I don't know what HN. I have 9% of him, so I'm just right even with market basically. So it's more of just like being conscious that like he's gonna like be volatile. So like I probably don't want another week 6 bye, just because that gives me like 2 spots that are open that week pretty early on, and like and I'm dealing with like a volatile running back. So so I'm just a little more cautious for like downside scenarios when I draft someone like that. But I think he's fine. The guys I'm like out on, like Derrick Henry in this format feels like scary because he's probably gonna have some big spike weeks. But like in that offense, like there's a lot of mouths to feed, including Lamar. Some are pretty obvious. Like I think Austin Eckler is tough for me because it's like, I think Brian Robinson's good and he's still the lead back, so I'm fine clicking him in this format. But then, like, if Eckler's actually dust, then you're just wasting a roster spot on him. It's really tough.
Yeah.
Obviously, like J.K. Dobbins. I think the interesting one is like Jalen Wright is fun in BBM, just because it's like, what if he's like a miniature HN and he gets some work? But like here, it's like, can you bank on that? And then another guy I've seen like 1% of is Alvin Kamara. I mean, that's a player take too, but like, what if he is washed? I'm a little worried about the downside. I'm also like not clicking Kendre Miller a ton, so it's more of like just kind of the backfield I'm out on, just because it's a little uncertain.
You want a little more certainty in this format.
Yeah, like DeAndre Swift, probably fun in BBM if he has a bounce back year, but like, do I want him over Jaylen Warren ever in this format? No. So like, I'm not going to do that. So
I'm going to just break some news to you. Are you an NBA guy at all?
I'm seeing the chat blow up about this massive Miles Bridges trade. So
chat is blowing up. I am apparently my chat is not uploading because I don't see any Mikal Bridges. But I'm seeing trade summary. Knicks get Mikal Bridges and a 2nd round pick. Nets get Bojan Bogdanovic, up to 5 first-round picks, 1 second-round pick, and a 2028 pick swap. That is kind of nuts. Kind of very, very exciting for the Knicks there.
We hate Mikal Bridges in this house after last season's. He was basically like inside joke is like ETR and the projection sites like project him great every single day.
Yeah.
And then he just continues to score like 31 fantasy points maximum. So we in this house we disavow Mikal Bridges.
Maybe he'll be better on the Knicks. You never know. Maybe things will change. They'll use. I mean, he's going to be playing 46 minutes a game, so that helps a little bit. Helps the floor.
I guess that was one of the problems. Is whatever his name is, Jack Vaughn, just never played people consistent minutes, and you would just try different rotations nonstop. So hey, maybe. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't want to get too sidetracked, but I saw that and I was like, oh shit, that's exciting. You're talking about Hoops Discord. Okay, that chat. My one final thought on running backs before we move on is I noticed you said on your stream earlier you really like Antonio Gibson. You mentioned Jaylen Warren. Are you a little bit more inclined to take PPR guys here in this format because they have a little bit of a higher floor with the, if you catch 4 balls, that's 2 fantasy points, raises your floor a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I haven't thought of it that way because, in theory, you can make the argument half PPR it's worse and you want chase touchdowns. But I think it's more like a naturally they're priced in cheaper. Generally Najee goes a few spots ahead. Zach Moss goes a few spots ahead of Chase Brown. Pollard goes a few spots ahead of Tajay Spears, even though their coaches said there's the same. I don't know what other examples there are, but I mean, the one that I have a ton of exposure to, like I said, is Antonio Gibson, and like that's a big difference in price. But it's like, and Ramondre catches passes too, but like Gibson's always been a pass catching back, and that's more of just like I think he's the end of like that tier of running backs I want. But it's I think I lean to him more because they're cheap, and so the way I'm building my teams, they just like naturally fall right where I start hammering running backs. So
okay, yep, that makes sense. Wide receivers, you said that you're 0RB. We probably don't need to spend a ton of time on wide receivers, I would think, unless do you have thoughts on wide receiver archetypes that you're particularly targeting here, or what's your strategy with wide receivers in the Eliminator?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. I mean, in general, I'm taking probably 5 in the first 6 rounds, like every single time, and then stopping till round 18, as I've said. And I didn't say it earlier, but my build every time is not every single time, but I in an ideal world, I would have 150 teams that are 3 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 7 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. And so it's a little different where BBM, I'm usually like 5 running backs, 8 wide receivers for upside more, and hoping my running backs are healthy and all that stuff. I guess the only archetype that I have a ton of is Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas, JSN type range. And I think that's more of a byproduct of they're there at the 70 range and they kind of slide sometimes. And I'm usually double tapping receiver there because if anything, I'm getting that anchor RB around Mixon or Pacheco range. So I think I naturally am grabbing those last couple wide receivers before I just start pivoting to running back and all the onesies. And so, I mean, my take is that Lad McConkey will probably get more expensive in camp, just where it's like in this format, I kind of don't mind like a guy who's maybe a slot receiver and just getting, some drawn up work and, 5-6 catches a game or something with upside. And then Brian Thomas just seems like mispriced as far as being like the clear 4th wide receiver coming out, drafted there on a team where I think Calvin Ridley was pretty bad and still got a good amount of work. And so those are my top 2. And then I have a ton of Malik Neighbors just because he seems a little cheap. And then after that, like Keenan Allen, Christian Kirk, JSN, and Drake London. I think those guys are a little like maybe higher floor guys for their price. And then JSN's just like a bet on a good profile that was a little down, a little bit of like preseason injury luck. So maybe that contributed, but we saw him come on later in the season. So I guess you can target, and like I don't have a ton of like the Josh Palmer types that, people kind of classify as an eliminator pick. But I think they're fine. I just think you're getting elite guys, like they're going to popcorn weeks and you're going to be fine. You don't need to necessarily draft boring players. So
yeah, I think that is a point well taken, that you don't, we think like, oh, you need floor, so get the boringest guys, but that is a way to get floor, is just having guys that hopefully offset their spike weeks. You still need guys to put up points, and a guy like HN, that example earlier, like even if he is a little bit volatile, he has weeks where he's going to score 30 fantasy points. He can carry you some underwhelming performances elsewhere. So you still need some of those guys. My other takeaway from that whole conversation is you're just not afraid of the rookies at wide receiver, which, is something that might cross people's minds. Like this is a contest where teams are being eliminated every single week of the year. So maybe the way that rookies, kind of get better throughout the year isn't as important in this format. But it also sounds like, I mean, you're talking rookies generally who I think might have a role early in the season. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. These are the types of rookie receivers that I would expect to be out there in a significant way early in the year. Do you have the same thought with the later receivers, Malik Washington, or I'm trying to think of who some late rookies would be. Troy Franklin. I guess you already talked about Troy Franklin a bit. Jalen Polk, I think, is a guy that you've mentioned. How do you feel about the rookies that are Jalen Polk? Probably not. Roman Wilson would be a better example than Jalen Polk. The guys who have maybe less of an established role expectation.
Yeah, like to give an example, like here's a random wide receiver room from one of my teams that I drafted, right? So it's Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, JSN, and Jalen Polk. That's the only receivers, 7 receivers. And you think about it, like Tyreek is considered like a ceiling guy, but at the same time, like just a combination of like Xavier Worthy is considered a very like volatile, probably, high upside type guy on speed guy. But at the same time, it's like JSN is like kind of more of like a middle range of outcomes year 2 guy, at least, with being a slot receiver kind of. And then like all of like Tyreek, Nico, Devonta, and T are like ceiling guys, but they're probably not all 4 busting the same week, with the amount of talent that is. True. And then you're betting on Jalen Polk or whoever you take in the 18th round, same thing, where it's like they're going to be on the field, and so they just can score you a few points each week for a floor. So I guess that's the way I think of it. Yeah, but I'm drafting guys like even earlier when we talked about running backs, like I'm not targeting the Blake Corum here because it's like it's probably Kyron's job, at least until he shows otherwise. And so he's probably Blake Corum is probably a smash in BBM where it's like if Kyron gets hurt or if this happens, he could be the guy. But do you want to bet on that here where it's like I'm taking maybe a 0 for the first several weeks? So yeah.
You care more about standalone value than contingent value here. You want the guys who are going to have a role like a Chase Brown. You'd rather have Chase Brown than Blake Corum. I think he actually at this point goes later than Blake Corum in BBM, but in this format, you're taking Chase Brown over Blake Corum every time.
Yeah, and honestly, like I haven't done BBMs, but I don't notice much of an ADP difference. So I think people don't adjust enough. Where like in theory, like you would think Chase Brown maybe should be like top 110, and if he's still 127 or whatever he is, it's like it seems a little off. So I've been doing a bunch of drafting stuff, so I might be mixed up too.
Gotcha.
So,
and then finally, tight ends. You sort of already went over your theory with tight ends a little bit, but can you go over that again?
Yeah, so only 2 tight ends basically always. And the reason for that is in a format where at worst you have to advance 50 or half of teams make it through that week. I honestly think if you build your team properly elsewhere, you could take a 0 and just advance every single week. Not that we want that, but I think you're going to feel uncomfortable somewhere. Like every draft you draft, you're like, well, this room looks a little shaky, right? And with wanting floor here, it's the position we can project floor the worst. I'm just going to bet on I would say have some player takes, guys have solid roles, and then 2 guys don't overlap bye weeks, and you don't need the spike week from elite tight end. So I think I'm trying not to target them. If they fall, I'll take them, just have different builds. But I'm typically outside, like the 2, I guess, spend up guys I have, 18%, 19% Dallas Goedert, 13% Brock Bowers. I think those guys, and then Njoku probably similar, fall into the range where it's comfortable to click them, especially if like the running backs you like are gone. But other than that, it's like Juwan Johnson, Hunter Henry, Noah Fant. I actually do have 10 and 9% Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, but I think those are the only 2 elites. Other than that, Tyler Conklin, Jake Ferguson's another one. If you pair him with Dak, feels solid. And then Musgrave, even Tucker Kraft, like guys like that who are like, that's basically a tight end committee room if Kraft is healthy. So, and then I think if you're going to take an elite tight end, I prefer I have 6% Kincaid too. So like those guys who are more like accumulators, they're on the field, they're probably the number 1 weapon for their team. I prefer that over like, even a Trey McBride or a Sam Laporta. Like Sam Laporta is probably a 3rd weapon on that team behind like Gibbs in the passing game and, well, I guess maybe not passing game, but Amon-Ra is the clear one. And so you have this kind of dynamic where probably Marvin Harrison Jr. is the number 1 in, Arizona. And so you have this thing where it's like, we know Mark Andrews is the guy when he's healthy, and we know Travis Kelce's the guy, and Dalton Kincaid is probably the guy, especially with Keon Coleman being pretty raw. So I think if you're going to go that way, that's pretty good. Ferguson at his price is like the 2 behind CD, but they don't have a ton of guys there, and he's probably just going to accumulate, a good amount of targets. And he actually ran bad on touchdowns last year, so I think there's some upside there. So.
And he's got that week 7 bye that helps. At least, I guess if you're only taking 2, maybe it doesn't matter quite as much anyway, because it's easy to just offset bye weeks. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, are you ready to jump into a draft? Do you have time?
Yeah, I've got time. As I was going to say, last thing is that tight ends do naturally correlate with quarterbacks' touchdowns, obviously the most. So I probably have a lot of Dak. So I'm going to if it lines up, I'm going to take I'll lean towards tie-breaking towards like a Jake Ferguson there.
We're getting in. If you want to draft with us, get in now. Yeah, it's a good call out. I'm usually I love correlating the tight end with oh man, we filled immediately. So I enter this and we are already filled. I was not expecting that with an eliminator. We do have some familiar names here. I see Nez in here with us. Jewish McCaffrey makes it in here with us.
Hansen is in one of my chats.
Jay Hansen.
Yeah.
You got Hansen.
There's a few guys. One of the few guys who's like in a lot of my rooms maxing is Lowell Hot Dogs, who's a DFS guy. So he's maxing these early. I'm pretty sure because early on he was in like pretty much every one of my rooms. So
I don't think I know. He's a DFS guy. Lowell Hot Dogs.
I thought he was. I thought I asked somebody, but I thought I recognized the username. So maybe I'm wrong.
It's very possible that I just don't recognize the user. I also haven't been playing MLB DFS. The only DFS I played recently is UFL DFS. I guess a little bit of UFC. So maybe I'm not up on the current DFS players. That's a good username. Lowell Hot Dogs.
It was funny because I had the brick overlay, and you know how it'll show like the stats if you hover above their name. And he was the one guy who won 50 and had the most player CLV of anyone I've ever seen. So I don't know if he like did 150 day one, just like autoing or what he did. But he had a 60 CLV average or something on his, or I don't know if it's cumulative. It must be cumulative, but yeah, I think mine was like 14 and a half, and I was like, that seems pretty good. And then this guy had a 60 CLV. So
damn. All right. So it must be pretty good, you'd think.
Or he's just drafting pure like CLV like values every time.
True. Just be an auto drafter. Very true. Jewish McCaffrey asks, Krutches mentioned 101 Lamb for Eliminator earlier. He wants to know if that is for just the Eliminator or all contests.
Yeah, I'm probably going to mix it to where I have 5% CMC or something. Yeah, I mean, this is not like financial advice. I'm just like, he's probably the greatest running back like talent wise, but like massive workload last year, crushed like, and so did CD. But I just think I just lean towards like on running back injuries and wear and tear, Madden curse, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Like I just get a little sketched, and like I said, I think structurally I like my teams better from the one hole where like. A lot of times you'll have to just reach big on receivers if you really want them because they're not going to come 24 picks later. So it's like versus like I can usually grab a follower at running back because people are drafting these zero running back teams. So
all right, so I have the ETR ranks in here. We have Bijan is the top ranked. He's also the top by ADP. I think you said you like Bijan. Is that where you go here or somewhere else?
Yeah, I'm Bijan here. I have Bijan over Brees. I think. Yeah, I've seen this recently too, and I actually think it's going to happen just in general. Is that Bijan is going to keep climbing into like the top 4 and stuff, and I've seen him mix in more, but I think it's like so much of his last year's run bad was just like the Arthur Smith stuff, and now he gets a quarterback who dumps the ball off a lot, and yeah, I think he could easily like just be the Christian McCaffrey of this year. And so could Brees. I mean, but Brees did it already, and he's got a quarterback who loves to dump it off too. So I just lean towards Bijan's talent in that situation.
Yeah.
The only like hot take I have is back end of the first round is I have Puka or I have Garrett Wilson over Puka and AJ Brown. I think he'll flip him. Like he's the only guy there, and people I think are just a little turned off of Aaron Rodgers for whatever reason. Whether it's football related or not. And so I think it's naturally he gets pushed down a little bit, and obviously he was playing with Zach Wilson last year, and I think there's some recency bias, which is why we see guys like Jaden Reed, Tyquan Thornton get pushed up because they helped the winner win last year. So I think there's just like a little bit of recency bias there. And so I think like you're even seeing in like minicamp and stuff where it's just like every report I see is just like, oh, he caught another touchdown from Aaron Rodgers. Like every target's going to Garrett Wilson, and I'm like, I'm not going to fade that. Like we've seen Aaron Rodgers do stuff with Devontae Adams where it's just like, yeah, but you need this guy. So, I love Puka. Like I said, I would do like Garrett Wilson, then Puka, then AJ Brown, especially in this format. But yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I definitely am guilty of thinking that Aaron Rodgers is dust sometimes. I like, oh, maybe he's just done. And I know I've had the conversation with Scott Barrett where he's like, his last healthy season, he was like winning MVP. Like he's just like, I think Aaron Rodgers, was more banged up than we realized. Even his healthy season before last season, he was banged up. So I probably rate him off a little bit too much. All right. Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk. Anybody you particularly like here? Here's ADP.
You want to start by ADP?
ADP.
We could do the week 9 bye thing if you want. I think that's fine, or Nico Collins. But like I said, if you want to tie break towards the week 9 bye, I think that's fine.
The only concern is Ayuk going to get traded away from the week 9 bye, and we won't know. But I'm not that worried about that. I think that's a risk I'm willing to take.
I don't think. Yeah, I think. And I'm not obviously. I am a football guy. I mean, I played, but I don't know. I don't claim to know the inside of an organization. I just think I heard somewhere too where it's like that offense can function without Debo, but they can't function the same way without Ayuk, where it's like the down the field stuff. And so I think I think they can draw stuff up for Ricky Pearsall. He's not going to be even close to like what a Debo would. Everyone wants. There is no other Debo. Everyone tries to comp Corley and these guys to Debo. There's not, but I just think they can still run a really solid offense with a deep threat and the route running of Ayuk. So I think they're just going to pay him if it comes to it, whatever they have to do. So I'm not too worried about that.
Okay.
I'd be more worried about the Debo trade, which is, I don't think any of them get traded at this point because it's too close to the season. They just run it back. But if they were like forced to for some reason, I think they would, take a lower price and trade Debo.
Yeah. Lundar agrees. Kirk is going to dump the ball a ton early on. He's such a progression guy. It takes him a bit to get comfortable. Sounds good for our Bijan share here. CLN says, to me, Rodgers will want to play too slow. He does historically. He likes to play slow. Easy. Love that. Yeah, we're not talking politics on this stream. Appreciate you, Easy.
I would never get political ever. So
is that true? I have no idea if you are a political guy, if you like talking politics. I'm like, I don't want to have political conversations.
No,
in general, certainly not on a stream.
In my Discord, we joke about it all, or not my Discord, but in the Discords I'm in, we joke about it. But I actually stole the joke from Denny Carter, who living the stream with JJ. So when they're just talking questions and stuff from the listeners, they would always Denny would always just be like, I don't want to get political here, and then just say something random. So I started saying that all the time. I'd be like, nice. I'd post a Trump GIF or whatever just for fun, or a Biden GIF, and I'm always just be not to get political, but and so now we just use that even if we're being overtly political.
That's funny. I like that.
Just joking around, yeah. But yeah, I try.
Jewish Graph says we have a Discord mod exclusively for Krutches. All right, good to know.
No, yeah. If anyone's curious, I just whoever's pro crypto, that's my thing. So I'm a bit of an not apathetic, but negative person when it comes to all government views. So
you just vote for your interests, and your interests are crypto. So you're I guess I could have guessed that you're a pretty big crypto guy just based on your Twitter.
Yeah. So I work in the industry full time, and then trade stuff on the side. So yeah, it's fun.
Josh, thanks, we already covered this. The Mikal Bridges traded to the Knicks. Yeah, that's big news.
I didn't know that was a Nova thing. That makes sense with Josh's Avi.
Yeah, expensive trade for the Knicks, but they're definitely going for it. They're going for the W now. That's fun. All right, so here's ADP.
So yeah, you see ETR likes it. This is where I would go pretty comfortably Cooper Kupp here.
All right,
I think
that's as boring as it gets. No, it's funny. He feels like such a boring click to me, even though he was crushed it.
The last time he was healthy, he was on pace for 300 or something fantasy, 320 fantasy points. So, I guess the risk with him is injuries, but we've heard nothing but solid things this offseason. So, and those guys he's not quite like a Thielen, but the guys who rely less on speed, I feel like I'm more comfortable being all right, they can just run routes and 80% and still get open.
Yep, exactly.
He's also the reason I'm they talked about this on ADP Chasing today, I think so. Everyone can go listen to that, but they talked about kind of the Puka versus Kupp thing, and I kind of sided with Gretsch there. That's my thought behind the Garrett Wilson thing, where this isn't to take away from Puka. The fact that he had a huge rookie wide receiver season is good. I'm not taking that away. It's just more of when they were both on the field, Kupp's not going to see nothing. He's still going to get some target share. So yeah.
My biggest concern with Kupp is I have heard rumblings from people who are more in the know than myself, like whispers that maybe Cup is more injured than is known publicly. Like he has not even injury, but bigger health concerns than we know publicly. But I also heard a rumor from these sources last year that he might retire after last season. That clearly didn't happen, so I'm not sure exactly the reliability of these sources. But that is my one concern is like maybe he's more has more health concerns than we realize. All right, here is the top of the queue here, and
see this is where I didn't want to go week 12 because I wanted to get Christian Kirk here. He feels like a great eliminator pick with like massive ceiling now that Calvin Ridley isn't there. So this is a pick in all formats for me over T. Higgins. I would be clicking Zay Flowers here too if he was the other option over T. Higgins probably. But I think when you looked at what was the other option? I guess it was Nico Collins week 14. But I'm trying to think who else was there as far as last pick.
Olave maybe, or where were we picking?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, definitely the week 12. If I'm going to use that week 12 spot, it's usually on Christian Kirk around here. So
nice. Yeah, it's a good pick. I don't have a strong take of Kirk versus Higgins, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I think I was just going to mention on the Cup pick, like I think you can play this with like a diversified portfolio if you want as well. Like same thing as BBM. If you want to be really diversified and don't have player takes, that's fine. Like, Tank. I mean, I guess it's a bit of a reach on Tank Dell, but it's probably fine to take Michael Pittman. I'm obviously worried about just the volume there, but I do think with Anthony Richardson, he's probably not a bad pick in this format if he's the RPO guy because he could get a ton of catches and just have that mid, maybe not the ceiling, but has the kind of mid-range outcome. So I think he's probably fine in this format. It's a little bit of a weird spot, a wide receiver there with DJ Moore gone and Diggs gone, but I don't want to take a second running back. I don't want to reach on a quarterback, and I don't want to reach on a tight end. So I'm just going to take a wide receiver. So it's less of a Cup take and more just like I'm taking wide receiver here because I know it's going to be a little possibly sketchier later on.
So if DJ Moore had been available here, would you take DJ Moore over Cup?
Yeah, for sure. I'd probably take him in maybe Diggs over Cup. I think Diggs and Cup are the same as far as age and injury stuff, though. So
right.
I probably prefer Cup just because like he's one of two receivers instead of one of three on that team. So
true. Yeah, feels a little bit less volatile than the Houston situation.
Yeah, and so you saw at the Cup pick too on ETR's ranks, they had all the quarterbacks up high.
Yep.
Usually one of them falls. So like the reason I wouldn't have taken like Hurts or Allen there is I can get him at 42 a good amount, which is where I have my like 9%, Josh Allen and stuff. Sure. And then same thing, Mahomes will sometimes come back to like 55. And that's why I love Mahomes more than the other guys because it's like a little more of a dead wide receiver spot. It's like, let me grab my really safe onesie here and then just keep hammering those, flex spots.
Okay. Unfortunately, Mahomes goes in this one. We do not have the luxury of a falling Mahomes, but that's fine. Whatever. Not a concern for us. We'll take what comes to us. Laporta, Kelsey, McBride go. Maybe some people who listen to this stream in this draft with us are so leaving some of the elite tight ends.
Yeah. It's pretty solid.
Yeah, I guess Andrew. I guess they're not really going that far off from ADP. Let's start looking at what is on the board. So this is the ETR ranks. Here is ADP. Don't know what you would rather look at.
ADP is probably fine. I've been using leg up just like the regular BBM ranks for this, and then just sorting because this is my one like feature request I've been saying ETR needs to do is offer an option where you're weighting in ADP 50% like leg up does. So it's a little more smoothed out because I don't want to like time out an auto Josh Palmer at 91 or whatever they have him. Yeah. He could be a good pick, but it's like takes like two clicks in a spreadsheet to add that average. I feel like so it'd be nice if they had a version of that. Hollywood could be fine. We have a week 6 bye, so I'm probably going to say like if we want to reach on Godwin. Otherwise, I think Kincaid's the pick here.
I don't hate Kincaid here. Just hope that he is the guy who gets all the targets and then wait for a second. Yeah, just given our options here, I feel like Kincaid, Hollywood worthy. I mean, we could have gone Godwin certainly. He also has that week 11 bye, which is not the worst. But to me, like Hollywood and Worthy are like I think examples of players that I like better in BBM than here, just because of I don't know how that wide receiver room is going to break down. I'm not really. I don't have a strong take on the Kansas City receiver room, but I feel like the downside risk is pretty strong with those guys. So I'd rather take my shots in BBM. Do you disagree with that?
No, I think I agree. I have a good amount of Rashee Rice here, weirdly enough. But I think with him, it's that like we kind of know he's the clear receiver that has chemistry with Mahomes. And so like if you're willing to sacrifice 6 weeks, you're getting him 20 picks past the other two guys. And in this format, people can get scared of him. I've seen him go like 95, which is like you're giving me the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver 1 most likely at pick 95. Like I'm going to click that and typically that's a spot where like I feel I'm too heavy on because I usually have 5 wide receivers, and so he's my wide receiver 6. So it's like I'm like I could actually just do a 6 wide receiver team and be done if I wanted. But yeah, I don't know what this Trevor Lawrence guy is doing here.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Trevor Lawrence at 59.
Huh. Sometimes you'll see some weird stuff. Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah, I think if you pull up Fantasy Football Garage's comment here, I think this is really good. If you are, you're going to kind of the 3 late quarterback build, you can tie break to like Chris Godwin, JSN, even Olave, and then just kind of keep in mind which quarterbacks have bye weeks you like to. So, I think that's something you can break ties to. Same thing. I think if you want to go DeAndre Hopkins, it's good because you're like, well, I get the nice comfy week 5 bye on Will Levis too, like whatever you want.
True.
So.
All right, our pick coming up.
But then this is probably the one format. It's also fine to go naked quarterback too.
It's funny. I just said I don't like these picks for this format now. We're at pick 66. Hollywood Brown is available here if we want him.
I think either Kansas City wide receiver is fine if you want that.
Do you have you don't have a preference between them?
I don't usually get Hollywood Brown, so I usually end up with Worthy when he falls, but Hollywood usually goes early, so this is kind of a nice value.
Yeah, it's because I don't have a strong take between them, I'm typically more inclined to wait and get Worthy there, but when it's 15 picks past ADP in round 6, that feels like a good spot to get some Hollywood exposure.
Yeah, I assume he won't come back. Like my guy is like in that range is I tend to want to click Lad McConkey. I don't know. Maybe it's just my takes are too strong there. But I'm typically like I said, Worthy feels like a scary floor play. But it's like if he's my wide receiver 4 or 5, like
you can handle that.
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I did look at Lad there. I thought Lad might make sense, but I'll get plenty of Lad later on. I'm sure you have plenty of Lad already. So when you can get, of course, I don't know how common this is for Hollywood Brown to fall 15 picks past ADP. Maybe it's more common in this format than I'm realizing.
I don't ever see him fall. This is also like the most badges I've seen in an eliminator. They feel kind of slow, but like I feel like most of the typical like sharp players aren't in these rooms when you're not on a stream at least. So it's usually like me, my buddy Deez. He's maxing this right now. Hansen is in our group chat with Deez as well. So we'll usually sometimes hop in a draft together, and that's basically everyone I see. But it's usually like a couple badges in each room. So it's a little bit, people that see Hollywood Brown and just click them because they see the name. So
yeah, here we're half and half, 6 badges, 6 non-badges. Obviously some familiar names in here, but maybe
so for me, I have 13% Xavier Worthy here, 10% Rashee Rice, and then 4% Hollywood. So that's probably just taking the cheaper of the guys who falls.
Yep. And of course, Jewish McCaffrey takes Xavier Worthy 1 pick after us. I'm curious, Jewish McCaffrey, if we had taken Xavier Worthy there, would you have taken Hollywood Brown, or is that a strong player take you have? Says must have taken the Trevor Lawrence guy must have taken Krutches quarterback recommendation a little too strongly. I did think that was a bit of a hot take that you gave on your stream earlier, that you're not convinced that CJ Stroud is going to outscore Trevor Lawrence this year. Of course, he takes both of them, so he didn't listen that closely.
Yeah, that wasn't even like a supposed to be a hot take. I know. Yeah. I'm not a hot take artist. Like I think I have very, very boring takes, which sometimes annoys people when it comes to like BBM.
Me too.
But where I'm like, because they love to like Galbrain. A lot of people do all off season, and I'm just like, guys, just draft really solid teams and hope you sun run. Like it's kind of boring, but obviously we need content to talk about. So, but yeah, I think it's more for me that like, same thing with Puka. Like I'm not going to take away his really good rookie season from CJ Stroud, but like he's not a Russian quarterback. And this is kind of a thing I have against all the Russian quarterbacks, including or the non-Russian quarterbacks, like including Jordan Love in that range, where it's like, I feel like we're drafting them at their ceiling. I said this about like Najee Harris last year, where I had 0, and obviously I got other stuff wrong, but where it's like, yeah, like I don't think there's necessarily a meaningful gap between like year over year with like touchdown luck and other stuff and drop rate that Trevor Lawrence's receivers had, where like, you know, and I guess less so Trevor Lawrence, but for me, it's like Dak is a great example. Why is he 40 picks past or 30 picks past CJ Stroud when he probably should just straight up go ahead of CJ Stroud? Like they lost their starting running back who was supposed to be good, and now they have CeeDee Lamb, you know, bringing all the pass catchers back, and he's going at what 90 or something. Like it doesn't really make sense.
Evan Ingram does feel to me like a very eliminator. I'm not suggesting that we take him here because we already have a tight end, but he feels like a very eliminator pick, just a guy who's going to rack up PPR points. All right, who do you like?
I was a little worried about this range, especially in a sharper room, because this is where it gets really, really bad. Is this sorted by ADP right now?
This is sorted by ADP, yeah.
Okay. I think like this is where I actually probably lean Ramondre, even though I take a lot of Antonio Gibson. The other one would just be like, if you want to go Najee Harris, like I really can't click on Aaron Jones. I'm a Vikings fan too, but I'm just like bullish on Ty Chandler, and especially in this format, I don't really want Aaron Jones. So I think you can make an argument for Kamara, but like I said, I'm just like not sold on anyone in this range. I think you could go quarterback if there was someone decent here. So
we breezed over the fact you're a Vikings fan. I don't think I realized you're a Vikings fan.
Yeah, I'm just dead inside, you know, as many of us are. So I mean, it's funny.
Other Minnesota sports teams or just the Vikings?
I'll root for the Wild, but I'm not a big hockey fan. So, but yeah, really, my dad is just a big Vikings fan growing up, so I just took after that. And then, you know, as a kid, I was like, you know, reading Vikings training camp news and living and dying by every game. And then I got into fantasy, and you're like, well, I sweat my own teams way more, and like, why am I crying over something I can't control as a fan? Which is, I know, boring, but you know, it's like nowadays I have my laptop on the Vikings game, and then my TV is like red zone, and I'm watching all my sweats. So, and then if they're getting blown out, it's like, all right, time to go sweat whatever live players I have in the Millie Maker or whatever it is. So
yeah. I was wondering if you were going to lean toward Najee there. I guess we could have. He also does have that week 9 bye, which is kind of nice. But I think Ramondre does make sense. He also just signed the big contract. I imagine Ramondre's ADP is going to be moving up in a lot of formats after the big contract.
Yeah, and I don't think it's warranted. It still like hasn't changed my thoughts on him, but I assume the field is probably just gonna be like, well, he got paid, the coaches like him, so I think it's fair. But like I said, typically I'm not going him because I like other guys, but like I said, there's, you know, if we needed a tight end, I think Ingram's fine or Jake Ferguson's fine, but we didn't. And then you can see the run on all the receivers right before us is typically what I would be going at. So, and I'm never clicking James Williams here. So
yeah. I don't hate. I like Joe Burrow. He's another quarterback in that range that I like, but I'd be fine going with one of these running backs. Anybody else you like?
Yeah, I think I would be clicking Jonathan Brooks here probably. So some people are worried, but I think he'll play early season even if he's like somewhat limited. And then week 11 bye is always really nice on him. You're not going to run into anyone other than Bucky Irving is the only other week 11 bye you'll see from here on out. So usually like when
Arizona guys, are you not a Trey Benson guy?
Oh no, I guess not really. I think I was probably clicking more like Zach Moss or waiting and then taking like Dak there. But yeah, I guess there are. But I'm fine with like two overlapping buys. But But yeah, I think it's still less than week 12 or 14 where you're running into like I think I break away from week 12 and 14 the most.
I do too. Definitely week 14, like in part because I like Jaleel McLaughlin late. I like Antonio Gibson late. Like a lot of those guys that go pretty late to me are interesting clicks. So I definitely break ties away from, I think week 14 the most, week 12 the second most. But yeah, reminder makes sense in this format on this team, I think.
I can respond to CLN's comment if you want. I covered it earlier, but yeah, I think the reason is like, yes, there's probably going to be, maybe I run into some injuries and bad lucks. I already have with 50% Juwan Johnson, but I don't think he's going to miss the season or anything. It's just more of a CLV thing. I got reverse, ADP movement on him. I was reaching at him like 170 and I could probably get him 200 now. So that's really the only negative. But for me, it's like late rounds. instead of taking these crazy shots on like Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin and guys in the 18th who could be zeros, like I want to in best ball as far as GPP stuff goes. Here I can take the boring like Greg Dortches in the 18th and the CEH and Rondale Moore's, just the guys who are going to score like a few points and give me a floor. So I think I can like better project that. While you'll see in these drafts, people still take these like swings, which make no sense to me. So it's just kind of like breaking ties towards that. And then I just want to save my BBMs for later. So it just makes sense to max this right now.
That's a good question from Jewish McCaffrey. It says, thoughts on overlapping bye weeks across the different positions rather than just within each position group. Yeah, that's something that you don't have to worry about it in BBM. I don't care about across different positions, but here I guess it does make sense to worry about it a little bit more across position groups. Is that something that you think about much, like across not having a week 12 bye at each position and 2 at wide receiver, just like really shrink your team for certain weeks? Is that something you think about more here?
Yeah, I think. I would just break ties. It's like I think he had a couple week 14 bye wide receivers earlier. So if you have like 3 out of your 7 wide receivers with week 14 buys, then yeah, maybe break ties and running backs away from week 14 because you want the flex as well, the options. So yeah.
All right, here's where we are at.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty clear Tyler Lockett pick. Like I said, typically I want 5 wide receivers in the first like 6-7 rounds, but this is a pretty sharp room, so we're getting pushed down a little bit. So typically this would be like a JSN for me. It's just Tyler Lockett, so it's really not too much of a difference.
Yeah, Tyler Lockett. I like that pick. I'm a fan, and I am. You said that you're not going to get pushback on your Geno Smith on this stream. You are correct. I'm not going to push back on the Geno Smith pick. I'm a fan of that Seattle offense. I'm buying in this year.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm not. I have 15% Geno, so not close to like my 30+% Drake May and Derek Carr. So I like Geno. He's not my top priority either. So.
Yeah, me neither. It's not like I'm going into drafts like I need to get Geno Smith. It's more of I strike out on my other quarterbacks. I like taking pieces of that game. So then it's like, all right, there's another. I'll take another Geno fallback option, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it's very much pockets of the draft. So my top 2 exposures, like I said, are Drake May, Derek Carr, and then my next 2 in order are Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. So it's like you can see where I'm taking quarterback a lot, and then right after that, it's Will Levis, Geno Smith, JJ McCarthy. So it's like I'm grabbing usually 2 late, and then I'm grabbing like 1 of Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence.
Now that I'm seeing it, I'm wondering if Jay Hansen, I've never thought about this before. Is that the owner of Fantasy Points? I wonder if that's John Hansen, the fantasy guru, or I forget what the exact name is, but I wonder if that's Jay Hansen. It's also a common name, so it probably could just not be him.
I definitely don't think so. He's got an NFT profile picture in our group chat. It's
you know Jay Hansen. You said okay, gotcha. I forgot that was somebody that you know. All right, we're coming up on our
chat right now, so he probably is hearing you talk about him.
Yeah, that's funny. All right. Josh Palmer is up here. This is by ADP, very high in the ETR ranks, 95 by the ETR ranks. I'd be fine with it. Any preferences here?
Yeah, that's probably fine. I actually don't have a lot of them, so I think that's fine. And I don't think we have a week 5 buy guy anyway. So
yeah, we do not.
I think it's pretty clear.
I don't know. I feel like every time I draft Bijan, I think it's just the way the things line up. I always end up with the double B-Rob with Bijan and Brian Robinson. And I don't think it's something that I do intentionally, but they do have offsetting bye weeks. I think it's just like where they come on the board. So that was one of the names that popped up to me. Was like, oh, Brian Robinson on this team. But I feel like I have that in like BBM. I somehow always end up with the double B-Rob.
Yeah, I didn't think of it till like a couple of days ago, but I was just like, what about like we have Trey squared on Arizona alone. So it's like Trey Benson, Trey McBride too. Yeah. It's like, man, maybe stack this up for like the meme power. Just like maybe there's something to it, So.
Yeah. Starting CMC HN in the Eliminator. I think it's fine. Like it's not the ideal start certainly, but not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's so much draft capital. I'd probably be like CMC mix in or something like that if I really wanted like 2 anchor RBs.
Yeah.
Because you're getting 2 studs. And then if you're doing that, you probably don't want to take another one till like Marshawn Lloyd range. and then maybe you can go 5. But the reason I don't like that is I've done some elite stuff, and when I go 5, I'm still like, it's just a thinner room as far as balance goes, right? As far as injuries. And so it's like, sure, if I'm doing 5, I have a very strict, like, no overlapping buys, right? I'm like week 9, week 11, week 12, week 14, week 6. That's it. But, and I'll like heavily break ties with 6 running backs. I can like spend down and have the flexibility of like, all right, I have like a couple week 14s. That's fine. So.
Are you a bye week bro in standard best ball, or is that something you're not very concerned about in like BBM?
Yeah, I don't think about it as much. Like, I guess like the main difference I think about is like in BBM, if I'm going 3 quarterbacks, I'd be fine having like Mahomes with Knicks and May, where it's like week 14, sure, I don't really care, they overlap. Here it's like, no, never, unless it's like the last quarterback left on the board. And I'm like, all right, like we'll probably have like 1 or 2 teams that are like that.
But would you avoid like Trevor or no, say Josh Allen, Derek Carr, like where you have 2 quarterbacks, both week 12, and it's only those 2 quarterbacks? Is that something you would avoid in BBM, or are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm never taking the 0. I think that's like,
okay. Yeah.
I think we have plenty of studies that show like the line between advancing, like the number 1 team in a pod usually blows the pod out. They just have a really strong team. Number 2 and 3 are usually like, I think it's like 10, like Neil Farley did a study on this, and it's usually, I think it's like 10 or 20 points. It's very close. And so like maybe at tight end, I've seen, maybe there's an excuse to be like a tight end scores like 7 points on average, so I'm going to take a 0 or whatever. But I think there's just no reason to say I'm voluntarily taking a 0 ever. Which is one of my like boring takes. It's like, no, I'd be fine having like 5 wide receivers with the same bye week and then having like just 3, and just hope they all hit my 1 week. But yeah, it's like there's no reason to like put yourself at a disadvantage when you need so much to go right anyway.
Yeah, I feel like you and I have a lot of the same boring takes. Not a lot of hot takes coming here, because I feel the same way. Like, why are you just taking the 0? Why are you trying the 3 running back build where you only take 3 running backs? Like, what is the point of this? Like, you're just taking on risks that you don't need to take, and I don't actually think that you're getting the upside that you think you get by doing a weird structure. So I think we're have kind of similar takes there. All right, so this is by ADP.
I think this is like typically Chase Brown time for me. I'm just thinking ahead.
Could go Herbert. We have Josh Palmer if we care about.
Josh Downs is the other option here, I think, with week 14 bye as well. Who would you say? Herbert? Yeah, let's go Herbert. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've already got the, because we have Palmer on there. I think that's a good pick.
It's always tougher to realize like when you're not in control of the draft, like because usually I'm like scrolling and like I know like I'm right. On my valleys and so I always forget it's a little tougher here.
And I do like I star things if I'm drafting by myself, whereas when I'm on a stream I try not to. Yeah, it's a different thing.
Yeah, Chip knows in the draft. Just draft the best players and hope you do well and build smart teams.
Yep.
But yeah, that's my boring take. Like I said, luckily I don't want to be at sell any rankings or anything. So I'm just playing my teams, and then sometimes I'll hop on a stream and chat through stuff because I think it's fun. Like I said, I waited till I maxed this too, so I'm not like telling people what I'm doing and then hopping in drafts with them as well.
Yeah. Although this is the one format where I'm like, I feel like it's the worst for you to draft to finish and then jump into a stream on this format than any other format, because like I said, like by week 2 you are competing with people that you have now given your advice to, but we appreciate your advice anyway, that you're willing to give it after.
Yeah, I'm not a best ball nihilist, but I'm also like, odds are I'm not winning a title. So right. I mean, last year, like, I wasn't like a crazy easy advance rate, but I advanced I think 40-something% or like 40% of my teams. Yeah, so or sorry, not, like 40 total teams. So I had like a 33% advance
still damn good.
Yeah, so like I know
we're on the clock here. Do you like
this
Charbonnet?
This is Charbonnet smash for me typically.
I like Charbonnet.
I love him entirely, and I think he's
better than Lloyd, I assume.
Yeah, I'll take him over Lloyd usually. He's my preferred like week 10 buy guy if I need one.
Yeah, I like the Charbonnet pick there. That was going to be what I would have done.
151 is our next pick?
Yep, we have 151.
Okay, and how many running backs do we have right now? What's our structure?
Here, I'll read off the team. So we have Justin Herbert at quarterback. We're at 1-4-6-1 currently. We have Justin Herbert, Bijan Robinson, Ramondre Stevenson, Jonathan Brooks, Zach Charbonnet, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk, Hollywood Brown, Tyler Lockett, Josh Palmer, and Dalton Kincaid.
Okay, cool. Yeah, typically this is why I really like the 5 or 6 elite wide receivers before the Brian Thomas range ends. And then I'm basically just hammering all the Ty Chandler, Marshawn Lloyd guys from the start of I guess Jalen Warren until Antonio Gibson. I'm just all running backs, and then I'm ideally I want a 6 there, or I have 5 and I add on CEH or Tank Bigsby or someone. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, it's just funny being in a slightly sharper room where it's we're forced into a slightly different build. And then same thing when you take the detour for tight end, even I feel like it just makes you feel slightly behind. If you do a draft on your own and you just I would tell people, if you weren't sure the structure, if you did two running backs, 5 wide receivers, every single start, I think you'd have a really solid team where it's you take Pacheco, Mixon, 5 wide receivers, and then from there you take all your onesie and fill out the team. I think you would have a really strong team if you just did that every single time. So
yeah, it's interesting,
especially in this format where you don't need the elite tight end huge week.
And I know you said it earlier. Can you remind me what your ideal structure is for this?
3-6-7-2.
3-6-7-2. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I'm basically always 3-2 on the onesie part. Sometimes I'll go 5-8. Okay. I might even have a 7-6 team if I have 6 wide receivers in a row to start, where I'm just completely loaded. But yeah.
Nez says that he's never not been scared when drafting an Eliminator. Yeah, you should be scared in this room. This is a tough room, and only 80% of us advance, so gonna get knocked out. Sorry, Nez.
All right, it is funny. I guess you do draft from a perspective of fear. I mean, that's the mindset they put you in when you draft here.
Yeah.
BBM, you're just all right, week 17, how much money are we going to win? Here you're exactly. Please not bust week 1.
Right. Let's burn our money in BBM. Whereas here it's you feel like you can at least have a sweat for a long time. Yeah, it's a different feeling here.
All right, we're coming back up here. Nice. Can we look at the RBs up on the board? I assume there's none I like. So
this is ADP. I know you're an Antonio Gibson guy. Ray Davis is there.
I think we're fine to punt, and then we'll take 6 with 2 later guys, most likely. Let's wait till he picks. He probably is going to take a guy we like. All right. Who's our quarterback? We have Herbert.
Yeah, we have just Herbert so far.
I think Polk is the clear pick here, and then we have a bring back at worst for week 17.
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
And then who are our quarter? Let's see, our receivers. So we have.
Could go Stafford. We have Cooper Kupp.
Typically
Gino out.
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say typically if I wasn't on stream, I'd just queue up every quarterback I could stack, and then that way I just know when they're coming up. So you don't have to do it on stream, but yeah. So just to know, we have Stafford as an option, we have Gino as an option, and Drake May as an option as well.
Yep. And that's it. And not the end of the world if we end up going naked quarterback, as we've talked about. We'd be okay with that with some of our quarterbacks on this one.
Yeah. And then there's always backstack guys too. So you could do a, Juwan and, we can't do the week 12, but typically you can do Juwan Carr or someone like that.
Yeah, true. Could do Jatavian Sanders. I don't know. I've been drafting Jatavian Sanders in BBM, and I feel like I'm treating him like he's safer than he is, which is a mistake I think I made last year with the round 18 tight ends who I view as he's the clear starting tight end, so he's going to score some points, and definitely learned last year that that's not the case. The clear starting tight end on some teams can score virtually 0 points. Are you a Jatavian Sanders drafter at all?
Not really, I would say. Probably more in BBM as a third tight end if I'm doing a cheap team where he's maybe he has an upside as a rookie or something. But if anything, I'm more Theo Johnson build. If I had to take someone, it's who's an athletic guy that has no incumbent in front of him? Yeah. Everyone wants to take Sam Laporta at 30, but they don't want to take the guy who's could do the Sam Laporta thing with no incumbent in front of him, unless you want to consider Bellinger good.
Hunter Henry here, we could continue to build out that stack if we wanted to, or just you want that?
I think that's the play. Yep. The only other one to consider would be Deshaun Watson if you want to backstack Elijah Moore, and then maybe Donta Foreman as well. But
I think we've got some good outs remaining, and we're 14 picks in. We have 4 picks left: 1 quarterback, 4 running backs, 7 receivers, and 2 tight ends. So typically that would be 3 more quarterbacks, 1 more running back.
2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs.
Yeah, right. Yes. Good math. That was bad math on my part. Ooh, Geno Smith goes to Joe.
Yeah. So I was going to mention it after the stream. I said this on ETR, or not ETR, on Pete's show too. But basically, as soon as I get past this tier, like the Hunter Henry, Antonio Gibson range, I'm fine just reaching, like throw ADP out the window. Because I think this is where, like I said, there's a pretty dead zone for wide receivers, at least their floor. So I think in this format, like the wide receiver tier is just flat until you get to like Greg Dortch or whoever at the end. And so I think it's like I'm never clicking like Troy Franklin or Marvin Mims, those guys. Javon Baker is like an option if I need a guy and I want to backstack Drake. And if I don't have Polk, I'll do Javon Baker. But other than that, I'm like really not taking too many like upside shots here. So I'm pretty fine just like taking quarterback or running backs, like, in this range, or tight ends if I need them, especially. But on this team, we just need quarterbacks and running backs. So,
yeah. Anthony asks, what week do teams start getting eliminated? I think he means what week do teams start getting paid? Because teams start getting eliminated week 1, but then they start getting paid week 8 if you make it through the first 7 weeks.
Yeah. All right, so
we take a look at what's here.
Yeah. So if you want to just hover over quarterbacks for now, I'm curious to see who's up.
This is by ADP.
Okay. Let's see if Jewish goes Khalil Herbert here or someone else. I guess you could use tight end as well.
Yeah. Is Jewish a big Khalil Herbert guy?
No, I just was looking at his construction.
Oh, yeah.
And he one running back that stood out around here. Not that I was going to take him, but I was going to say I was hoping he wouldn't go Will Levis, but then I realized we had a week 5 bye anyway, so it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
I think Will Levis would be a smash here because I love Tyler Boyd in 18th in this format because his coach brought him in to Tennessee, so he feels pretty safe. I think Bryce Young's fine here if you want to backstack Jatavian Sanders.
We could just take Drake May now and get.
I'm fine with that too. Yeah.
Think we?
Let's see it.
Did I get it?
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay, just barely.
Yeah, I was gonna say Drake's fine, and then we can always just grab one random quarterback late. I was saying earlier too, I definitely don't want to have to dip into this tier, but I think in this format, Russell Wilson is fine because you might get, especially if you have that early bye quarterback like week 5. It's like I could see him being okay in this offense, and then Arthur Smith is just kind of stubborn, so he's just like, I want to run what I want to run, and if he keeps us in rhythm and can run the offense, then I'll do it. So, yeah.
So you're out on Fields, I take it.
I have some, but like I said, typically, and this is like I said, a somewhat of a sharper room, but typically I'm just like, I'm done at running back already, or I'm just waiting for round like 17 CEH. So typically I'm just hammering quarterback and tight end here, so I'm just taking them above ADP. So like I've taken Geno and everyone at like 160 before. I'm just like, I don't really care past that range. I'm just getting the guys who I think are going to be solid floor guys.
Yeah. Tyler Boyd goes. Your guy Hansen takes your guy Gibson, takes your guy Boyd. I think you talked about McMillan as somebody who's growing on you. All right, let's we're at 2-4-7-2. We could go Khalil Herbert here.
Let's queue up Herbert, and just because he has a bye makes sense for us. And then let's look at the quarterbacks again.
Yep, here's quarterback by ADP.
I mean, we're in the middle of the round, right? So we're at pick 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're fine with Khalil Herbert.
I don't think I set any positional limits on this format, but still going to try and click the guys before letting it run out.
Yeah, no. Like, I'd be fine just grabbing a random quarterback there too. I'm not like in love with Herbert in this format just because who knows where he ends up or if what he's doing in his role. But
yeah,
I just don't know. Some of the later running backs I know have buys that overlap with our guys, so I just lean towards the week 7 buy and hope he's the guy that gets some run there in Chicago.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Herbert in BBM contest, but it's partially because I'm hoping that he gets traded, in which case we won't know the bye week, which hurts this format a little bit. But yeah, it's when he falls past ADP like this, I like that pick.
Yeah, I've seen him go like 200 plus, so I'm usually not rushing to take him here because I've seen him fall like a lot further. But yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I'll reach for him sometimes in BBM if I don't like the other running back options.
Jonnu and Chig are getting a ton of steam right now. It's funny, they were like going way past Noah Fant and like Juwan Johnson earlier. Now they're just like 180 or plus.
It's funny with Jonnu, he like as soon as he went to Miami, he got steamed up to like mid 150s. I want to say like he got really steamed up. I never saw him, and then there was like no buzz around him for a while. He fell back to round 18, and then I think Coach Speak Index maybe at fault for this. Given some steam, some Coach Speak. I guess it's really Mike McDaniel with Coach Speak Index kind of giving him the microphone saying, we maybe won't do the same thing we did last year with the tight end, and now people are steaming him up a bit.
That, and they saw him doing some running back drills or something and got all steamy about him. So,
oh yeah,
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, it's yeah, he was good in a bad offense, and they kind of fed him the ball. And I guess there's something to be said for out earning a possibly injured Kyle Pitts for targets. So I can't hate on it. I'm mixing him in.
I've been drafting him in late rounds quite a bit.
Yeah, Isaiah Likely is the one guy I'm gonna have 0% of. I don't get it. Like everyone's like, oh well, look what he did, and I'm like, yeah, well, the year before you played a couple games when Andrews missed, and that was when he initially kind of came into the fold, and everyone wish casted him to play 2 tight end sets with like Andrews, and they didn't do it, and then Andrews got hurt again, and then he smashed, and now we're all drafting Isaiah Likely again. So I can't hate on it for like BBM, but it doesn't really make sense here for me.
Not ideal. Not ideal what comes back to us here.
Yeah,
it happens. We can talk about it. Do you have a preference between these, or do you want to go? We can go different position also if you want to go get your guy CEH.
Yeah, I think CEH won't come back, so let's get him. All these quarterbacks are kind of dust anyway, so we'll see what comes back.
Yeah.
It also makes, like I said, a ton of sense. Like you just looked at with week 6 bye, it makes even more sense for us just to get lock up CEH.
Yep.
The only reason I was is if we have Bijan round 1. Generally, why I prefer the and obviously if you're in that spot, it's up to you if you want to reach on a Puka or whoever. But I do, like I said, in theory, I prefer the round 1 wide receiver, and then you can just wait for like Pacheco or Mixon if you want that elite running back, or just wait for Jalen Warren, Ramondre, all those guys.
Yeah. JMC says, Krutches, can you blink once if I should go 3-6-7-2 here, or twice if I should go 3-5-8-2? He wants you to blink your answer at him.
Oh, if only I could see his team, then I could.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I guess I could show you his. Where is he? Oh, he's on the other side of me.
I'm gonna default to 6 running backs though, just because it's more balanced.
Oh, here I have to do this way. It's the easiest way to look at him. So he's got Tua, Aaron Rodgers, and Will Levis at quarterback. Oh, that's
if Roshan's my 5, I definitely want 6.
Yeah.
Like basically, my rule of thumb is if your 5th running back is like Ty Chandler, I think it's okay to go 5, and they're not overlapping buys. Like if I have an elite running back plus my last one is like Ty Chandler, then I'm fine. I think Russell Wilson's fine. What's the new news blurb on him right there? I'm curious.
Remains in lead for starter gig as of today, so that's good.
Yeah, I think he's fine.
We really only need to cover week 5. Have 2 available is the big thing.
Yeah, this is like it's a little sketchy. Obviously, like I said, just because Drake May might not be starting week 5, which would be a worry. And then if Russ isn't starting, then we're probably dead, or we are dead. But
Yeah.
But like I said, if you do these outside of draft rooms, like you're not going to see. I've been preaching 3 quarterbacks, so everyone who's like watching the stream is going to go 3 quarterbacks. Maybe
Right.
the other part is some people go 4 in these rooms, and it kind of ruins the balance of the room.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a reason to ever go 4 quarterbacks. Like you're just spending, even if you made your last 4 picks quarterbacks, like you don't, like you say, with 3, if they're not overlapping buys, you have 2 shots for injuries and buys every single time. So one of your guys could even be injured and you still have a quarterback at least to score something. So
yeah, it's interesting. I've never done 4 quarterbacks in this build. I think you're right though. I don't think that I would ever really consider it.
Yeah, I would much rather go 2 elite quarterbacks than 4 quarterbacks in general.
Me too.
And then there's even if you punted tight end, I wouldn't go 4 ever. I've seen people do that too, but it's a tight end. It's a position that just doesn't matter as much. So if you wanted to punt and go 3 tight ends, I don't think it's bad. Structurally, we know it's okay. But I just think in this format, you can kind of punt tight end and get away with it. So
yeah. What's up, Chris? I know. I want to say Herzig was maybe I don't know if I want to say that he was pro 4 tight end, but he at least I watched some ETR content where he was saying that it's at least okay to do 4 tight end in BBM. Is that something you would consider in BBM, or is that just something you're not going to do regardless of format?
No, I'm never going to do that probably. And I think the exception I think they made in the studies is if they go 4 as their last 4 picks, then it's okay. But I just don't think there's a reason ever to lock up, what is it, almost a quarter of your team in the position that matters the least. So
yeah, that's generally my thinking also. Braden says no love for Troy and Bo combo. I think specifically in this format, we were talking about just trying to avoid zeros, and there's a real shot of Troy Franklin being a 0 or close to it, just not scoring any points for your team. So here it makes, I guess that's a shot that I'd be willing to take in BBM personally. I don't know if Krutches feels the same way, but in this format, I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, all offseason, I thought Bo is one of the best picks on the board, just being completely free as a 17-week starter, most likely. But I think if you want to mix in Bo, just try to prioritize Cortland Sutton and know that you're going to, click him and then click him around 100. He's probably a really good pick at his price. Because I don't, unless he gets traded or cut, he's going to be on the field all the snaps. So just grab Sutton and then backstack him. I actually I wish Greg Dulcich was healthy. I think he'd be a really good 18th round pick, but otherwise just stack Jaleel McLaughlin or Javonte Williams with Bo and just call it a day.
I didn't even see that Dort went undrafted. Yeah, we were not taking a wide receiver late, so we didn't get our Dort share. But yeah, kind of
that's why I love that format though. If you can just take 6 studs and then just punt to the last round, Elijah Moore is a good pick, Rondale's a good pick, Khalif's a good pick. There's I thought Dortch would go for sure. I've been talking him up all day too as my example for the 18th round.
Yeah. I draft a good amount of Dortch in regular best ball. I'm a little bit concerned about the is he the wide receiver 4 there now with Michael Wilson now getting a little bit more steam, and obviously Marvin Harrison, and then they have Zay Jones. So I'm a little bit nervous that he's the wide receiver 4 there, but obviously Kyler loves him, says that he would be top 5 wide receiver in the NFL if he were 6'5" or some shit like that. So he loves him. So that's at least something. The quarterback loves him. Let's take a look at our team. Sorry,
it's tough. I just want to bet on good players, and completely free. I get it's tough. You're betting on a roll a little bit, but it's do I think he fits the slot better than Zay Jones? Probably, and the other 2 guys are for sure playing outside. So I think it's as soon as they signed him, I was ooh, Michael Wilson's undraftable. So I've been lower on him, and maybe maybe that's a blind spot. I should mix him in, but I just think it's more of him or Khalif Raymond, who is number 3 in open score in the NFL, in limited sample, but legitimately number 3 with all Tyreek Hill and elite players. So
I think he was another guy with yards per route run too. Khalif Raymond, just some of his underlying stats were great. Of course, small sample.
Yeah, size, it's both of these guys are free because their roles are muddy, but it's we know they produce when they're on the field, and you hope that the rational coaching thing pays off.
Yep. Jewish McCaffrey says, can we get a grade from Krutches on my team? What am I, chopped liver? You want grade from Krutches. You don't want Neil's grade on your team, Jewish McCaffrey. Screw you, guy. No, he kind of read my mind. If you do want,
you do like the confusing diving scores where if you're watching the Olympic trials, they cut out like all the high and lows, and they just end up with the middle score.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we will read these teams. Greg wants to know, do you like Slayton in the 18th? What do you think of Darius Slayton in the 18th round?
The Giants in New England, I probably both prefer in BBM more so. Yeah, just because this is why I like lean Dortch, Raymond. I feel like they're both like #good, and they're both like in decent roles with upside. Slayton feels like everyone's like, oh, he's going to be on the field, but I'm like, and then everyone also loves Jalen Hyatt somehow. So I'm like, who's not going to be on the field? Because if we know that Neighbors is going to play all the snaps, and then Wandale, yeah. He's probably the best slot receiver they have too. So it's like, it's just, what do we do? One of these guys is not playing, and it just worries me a little bit. So
yeah, that's a good point. All right, we're going to read our team first and go over that, and then yes, we will read Jewish McCaffrey and Nez's teams. If anybody else is drafting with us and you want us to take a look at your team, just let us know and we will do that as well. So starting with our team, we have Justin Herbert, Drake May, and Russell Wilson at quarterback. So 3 different buys at quarterback. At running back, we have Bijan, Ramondre, Jonathan Brooks, Zach Charbonnet, Khalil Herbert, and CEH. So looking at the buys, I think we have all different bye weeks. All 6 of our running backs have different bye weeks, so that feels good having at least 5 running backs available for every single week of the season. At wide receiver, we have Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk, Hollywood Brown, Tyler Lockett, Josh Palmer, Jalen Polk. Our only overlapping bye that I can see immediately is Cooper Kupp and Hollywood Brown. Not a huge concern when you take 7 to have 2 with the same bye week. Even on that week, we have 5 different receivers available. And then at tight end, we have Dalton Kincaid and Hunter Henry. So we do have stacks for both Justin Herbert with Josh Palmer, Drake May with Jalen Polk, and Hunter Henry. I think this is a solid team. What do you think of it, Krutches?
Russell Wilson's game stacked with our Kansas City guys. So if he's alive in week 17, we got a game stack. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, I give it like a C+, B-. Like I feel a little uncomfortable having both of our 5th and 6th running backs be a little bit dusty. Obviously, I like Clyde. I'm just usually not like a Khalil Herbert guy here. Typically, I want like Charbonnet and then like Ty Chandler. If he fell to the next round and then we get like Clyde, I'd feel really good. Other than that, I think it's like overall solid. And then the other interesting thing is we have like not a lot of overlap on buys between, like you said, between positions too, which is pretty solid. It's a little bit of like I said, a tougher room where Kupp's a little bit of an interesting 3rd round pick, maybe great, maybe not. But I think Polk as our wide receiver 7 is like a really good like ending. Like I said, typically I'm Polk's like a wide receiver 6 or 5 or wide receiver 6 for me, and then I'm grabbing one late with like 5 elite guys. But that's basically just substituting out like JSN for Lockett, which is like similar. So
right.
And then tight end, like I said, typically spend more than I normally would, but perfectly fine. And especially where it's like there was nothing else there where Kincaid was. So
yeah. I think I like it better than you do. I think it worked out okay. But to your point. But I like you call Khalil Herbert dusty. I'm like, oh man, I feel like he's so talented. I'm like, to me, he's like a good running back who just like needs a role to open up to him. Of course, his team has never viewed him as that guy clearly. So maybe I'm wishcasting a little bit that they will see the light, that some team will see the light for him and give him more of an opportunity. But your point is well taken.
No, I guess not dusty. Yeah, similar as you. I think he's probably the best running back there, even above DeAndre Swift. But then I guess it's the other part is like Ramondre is not someone I normally click just because he's on a really bad offense, and like I can get that catcher in Gibson, right? So that's like my natural bias, but I might be wrong, and he might just be back to like 2-year-old or 2 seasons ago Ramondre too. So but yeah, in this team we have Bijan anyway, so like he's probably counting for us like 15 out of the 17 weeks. So so that's the hope if we're going 1st round running back. So.
Yeah, true. All right, we'll go Nez's team. Nez goes from the 3 hole. He has Anthony Richardson and Joe Burrow at quarterback. At running back, Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson, Zeke, Marshawn Lloyd, Ray Davis, Braylon Allen. At wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, Lad McConkey, Adam Thielen, Darius Slayton. And at tight end, Noah Fant and Tyler Conklin. So did he correlate much? He goes Anthony Richardson with
No one.
no one. He has Joe Burrow with Higgins. So not like majorly correlating. Which again in this format, maybe that's who knows, that might be better to not correlate. Certainly was my opinion last year that it was better. What do you think of this team? So it's 2-7-7-2.
Yeah, I was gonna say I really like it. Like I said, Anthony Richardson's not a click for me, but like let's just I think overall it's really solid. Like that's basically the tight end room I want, is like those two punt tight ends. And then the one difference is I just like look at this team and who's his running back 6?
Ray Davis.
So like just put in like Bo Nix instead of Braylon Allen and you're really, or sorry, running back 7. Like if you take Braylon Allen out and put in Bo Nix, obviously just not assuming the bye weeks, just looking at ADPs, like I think that 3-7-6-2 or 3-6-7-2 is just feels way better. But like I love the wide receiver room, tight end room is just what I want in this format. And then like I said, I'm fine with even with the 2 elite quarterbacks here, I'd be fine. Just like tack on a third just for injury's sake. So
okay, yeah, it's interesting. It's and like you said, you're not an Anthony Richardson guy, but he was. If you just assume Anthony Richardson stays healthy, which he's obviously making the assumption here, like he could be a smash. Like he could just like if he has a 20-point floor, gets you 25 points most week, could be awesome. Who knows? Who knows if he's able to? Will be fun to find out if he's able to stay healthy this year.
Yeah, I think it's making a tie, just like math wise. 1 out of 3 quarterbacks needs to score. 1 out of 3 running backs, if you have 6, needs to score. Even if you add in the flex part, it's like it's still different. But then at the same time, quarterback is just more important to have a score than at running back or your running back 2 or 3 or flex or whatever. So like it's just why I lean to like tying. The 6 running backs is fine, especially with his room. And then it's just like throw on some Justin Fields, even if it is, and then you're like, all right, we got a guy in there for some upside or floor or whatever.
Yeah. Jewish McCaffrey goes with a 3-6-7-2 build, so he's listening. He goes Tua, Aaron Rodgers, Will Levis as his quarterbacks. At running back, he has Kyron Williams, Josh Jacobs, James Conner, Kendre Miller, Roshan Johnson, Audric Estime. At wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, Zay Flowers, Xavier Worthy, Curtis Samuel, Jacoby Myers, Malachi Corley. At tight end, Evan Engram and Jonnu Smith. He did largely abide by the bye weeks. He has, 2 week 12, 2 week 14, but nothing more than that at wide receiver. At running back, looks like he offset his buys pretty well with all of them off different bye weeks. Quarterback, all different bye weeks, and then 2 tight ends. Looks like he listened well to your advice. Other than player takes, I think he has some players here. Although you say you like Rodgers, he took Rodgers. You said you're not a Kendre Miller guy. I guess that was one that you maybe don't love, but overall,
that's the running back range I like. So I'll click Kendre when like Todd Chandler and Marshawn Lloyd is gone, but I just take those 2 over him. But I think he's fine.
What do you think of the team overall?
And then I'm just curious, did he stack? Good
question. So he has Tua, Rodgers, and Levis.
So I think they're naked.
Corley he has with Rodgers.
Okay,
Jonnu with and we talked about that, how tight ends correlate well with the quarterback. Does he have naked Levis? And then I didn't look at naked Levis.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like the team that I like structurally I like the best. As far as like that mid tier, he's probably like bucket 4 at quarterback if you're looking at like one of those overlays. So this is what I like, but like typically I might be like Will Levis, Tajay Spears, just naturally the way I'm drafting. And then I just if obviously somebody reached on Boyd, it was Jay Hansen, but he probably wanted Boyd or whatever. And then he has the week 17 correlation with Levis too. So I think this is really, really solid. This is like pretty much the build I would go for, with like minor changes where like maybe I don't go Josh Jacobs when I have Kyron. If a running back or if a wide receiver's there, I might just keep hammering wide receiver, and then RB2 is like James Conner or someone. But I think it's perfectly fine.
Here's something that I want to. So you mentioned that we have bring back in week 17. Jewish McCaffrey also mentions a week 17 on his team. Now obviously we know week 17 not quite as important here, but it's 115 team final, so you need to be great. But I debate whether you want that, like, just to bring back without the stack, because I'm worried that, like, if you have the bring back, you're counting on, like, if you're betting on a game stack, like, you might be fucked to have your quarterback completely uncorrelated with anybody on the same team, because you still need, like, because those players are going to be scoring, like, he's going to be scoring somehow, probably passing to receivers. So I debate, like, how much you want the bring back if you don't have the primary stack. Am I thinking about this wrong? I'm trying to think through this in my head. Like part of me is like, I don't know if I want a secondary stack without the prime. Like, obviously I'm not prioritizing it nearly to the same extent as the primary stack. I don't know. I struggle with whether you want a bring back with an uncorrelated quarterback.
Yeah, I guess I'm not thinking that many levels deep in this. Like I said, ideally I would probably multi-table like 2 to 3 of these at once, and just try to get through them fairly quickly. But
Sure.
But I think, like, this is why, like, if you're drafting on your own, you can, build the kind of rounds, like, until round 10, you're kind of just taking the structure you like, the players you like, and then you start just queuing up all the quarterbacks that you'll want later. So if it makes sense to take in a spot, you grab them. But I guess a bring back is naturally good because there is no week 15, 16 stuff. And assuming they're not the same buy, it's probably better to skinny stack with a bring back than it is to double stack, because then have 2 buys, 2 teams on buy, guaranteed at the same time. So I'd probably lean towards like single stack bring back, since the bring back doesn't hurt you. So the biggest example of that for me would be, like, early on, if I do the 1-1 CeeDee Lamb, I might grab Devontae Smith at 24 instead of passing on him for like Waddle or someone. So where it's like week 7, week 5 buys, those are pretty good generally speaking. And now I have CD, Devontae Smith, and then one other player. And then it also gives me like an option for Hurts or Dak. It just gives you like a little bit of optionality with that. So I like the bring back, but yeah, I haven't thought through like naked quarterback with the bring back. I just click it if it's there, but.
Yeah, the bring back overall has grown on me. Certainly, I've enough research has been done showing the benefit of a bring back that this year I am focusing more on the week 17 bring back than I have in past years. It just is more just like the naked quarterback with the bring back. I don't know. I'm probably overthinking it, because there's still positive correlation with the quarterback and the bring back. It's just a matter of like, but then somebody else is going to have that quarterback with the pass catcher that they're scoring with. So I'm probably overthinking it. Just trying to think through that.
Yeah, I think, like, simply put, is like, try to get 2 like good like quarterback game stacks, right? So like your Rodgers or Tua are game stacked with a skinny stack or whatever. And then the third one is like the bye week contingency injury guy. Like, if you can stack them, great. If not, like, even if you look at BBM manifesto stuff, like 2 game stack quarterbacks is still really good. 3 is like done by like 1% of the field. So it's really just like overachieving. But I think, like, if you can multi-table and get, like, especially with this, is only $1,500 if you're maxing, which, if you're doing BBM, it's just smaller. And so it's, it's objectively cheaper than BBM, a little bit like simpler as far as like trying to advance. And so it just depends on like how much you want to focus on each room. If you want to do 2 at once, you can, like I said, stack 2 quarterbacks, whichever third one drops to you, great, grab them. And then you have like that security blanket quarterback. Like you said, you probably want your top quarterback scoring for you anyway, unless you just punted all 3. So,
yeah, good call. Greg asks, is the ADP much different in Eliminator from BBM? I didn't notice any huge differences. Do you think there's much difference?
You've done a lot more BBMs than I have, especially recently. So you know, but I don't think so. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that like leg up. I don't know how much of the market is using which ranks, but I'm guessing it's like first is ETR, then leg up, and then like RotoViz and others. So I think like the only consideration is that like ETR puts out specific ones for each contest, and leg up doesn't. So like you can't upload. Actually, for Eliminator, you can use regular. So I guess it like I use the leg up ranks for BBM. But I think like the sprint gets influenced a lot heavier by ETR, because they have their own sprint rankings that you can upload, and you can't upload like leg up rankings for the sprint. So yeah, I think they're similar to BBM because it's the same ranking set.
Yeah.
You can upload. So
yeah, I uploaded ETR's Eliminator. I didn't know you could do the regular rankings for this. That's interesting. But yeah, I used the Eliminator rankings for this one. And I didn't notice, I was not paying that very close attention to, though, whether there were big differences. But in general, I think that it seemed pretty similar, like both the rankings and the ADP. Obviously, there's going to be some differences in the rankings, or they wouldn't do it differently. But yeah, for ADP, I didn't notice any screaming differences. I'm sure there are some though. All right, yeah, Chad, you should rewatch with the sicko who has maxed this already. Yeah, you gotta listen to what Krutches has to say. This is a lot of fun. Do you have anything? I realize I asked you like bucketed questions. Do you have any other overall thoughts on the format that you feel like you needed to get out that I did not give you an opportunity to get out with my questions?
Nothing I can think of right now. Like I said, at a high level, 3-6-7-2 is my thesis. Mainly focusing on punting tight end, grabbing elite. Elite wide receivers, committee running backs, or running backs that are values in general, and then having 3 quarterbacks with non-overlapping buys. And then I would say like the last caveat is like past 165 ADP, just reach and get your quarterback in case there's a run. There's so many times I've seen like Dees and Hanson in our chat like post screenshots where they're like, well, my quarterback 2 is like, Russell Wilson, and it's like you don't want to end up there. So just reach on, if you want Derek Carr, if you want Drake May, if you want Bryce Young, just get them. And then you can turn around and grab like the Dortch in the 18th, or Clyde, or Tank Bigsby, or, Audric Estime if you want, whatever it is. So I think it's just like a little bit backwards from, and I actually think that's fine in BBM too, for what it's worth. Like I think the scroll down after 160 or whatever is fine because it's all $1 players you're nominating. So, think of it in that sense, like just get the guys, especially in this, because the structure is more important to me than BBM, where it's like, oh no, I have 2 quarterbacks. Like I need to run anyway. So it doesn't really like matter the downside. So.
Yeah, and it seems like some of the players that go earlier in this, you like less for this format, like the Troy Franklin, for example, versus Greg Dortch. And I'm sure like in general, it seems like some of those wide receivers in that like 165 to 200 range are just not wide receivers that you're really targeting anyway. So it just makes sense to wait on them. I think that's a good note there.
And I think the last thing is the one position I feel like if it goes, like if there's an avalanche, it's like in the 170s, 180s is like, oh, everyone's going 3 quarterback. And sometimes you see this in like a BBM too, where it's like, oh, if some guy went 4, I need to grab my quarterback early. And so now there's this avalanche on quarterbacks, and then you end up with the Russell Wilson quarterback too. So it's like, for that reason, it's like, just reach around on your 3rd quarterback, and then you're like chilling. And you can just, get whatever running back, quarterback, or running back, receiver, tight end falls that you need to fill out your team with.
Yep. Good note. Thank you, Jewish McCaffrey, for hanging out. Thank you very much, Krutches, for coming on the stream. This is fun. We'll have to do another. Maybe we'll do another Eliminator stream. Let me know if you get the itch to do some more Eliminator drafting, because I know you've done all of yours. Hopefully they open up another contest at some point. But until then, you're out on the Eliminator without doing streams. So hopefully we can do this again. Thanks a lot for coming on, Krutches. Where can people find you? What do you got going on? Anything to plug?
Yeah. I got nothing to plug. You guys can find my Twitter if you want. McDonald's XBT, like the restaurant, and then XBT is the letters. But I'm not tweeting about basketball specifically. I'm usually just tilting life and poker and basketball and gambling and sports. So, like I said, I'm not a content creator, so I'm just posting stuff. But if you guys have questions or whatever, feel free to find me wherever and, send a DM. Hopefully I can answer it. So.
Hell yeah. Go. And I believe I have the Twitter in the link in the description of this video. So if you want to go follow Krutches on Twitter, you should be able to find it there. I've also been tweeting out Krutches on Twitter in these tweets. So you can find them on mine. Thank you again, Krutches. Thank you all for hanging out, watching with us. If you have not already liked the video, please give me a like. Try subscribe if you haven't already done so. I didn't put this up here, but trying to get to 2,000 subscribers, would appreciate anybody subscribing. And of course, we're gonna get there soon, I think. And of course, join the Flannelverse Discord if you haven't already. A lot of good conversations there. We sometimes draft together in the Discord, so go, if you're looking for a place to do more drafts, go hang out there. All right, thank you all very much, and we'll catch you next time.